Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephen Buffalo. I'm from the Samson Cree Nation up in Treaty 6, and it's really great to be back in Medicine Hat. I graduated from the Medicine Hat College and was a member of the Medicine Hat Junior B Cubs while I was here. So, I'm also a proud Albertan, proud to be on the Alberta Next Panel. And today, on this beautiful day, we acknowledge that we're here gathered on the Treaty 7 and Treaty 4 territory, the ancestral homes of and trade routes of the Cree, Dene, Métis, Blackfoot, and Nakota Sioux. For our people, and for all the people who came before us, and all the people who come after us, and all who are here tonight, let's have a great discussion about our great province. And right now I want to introduce a former teammate of mine. He had a total of 2 minutes in penalties with the Junior B Cubs, and it was a vicious penalty. It was too many men on the ice. My good friend, Bruce McAllister. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. He's too big to argue with, so I got to take that every time he says it. It's not really true. Good evening, everybody. Great to see you all here tonight. My name is Bruce McAllister. I'm happy to help moderate tonight. I'm a Medicine Hat boy, so it feels really good to be home. Learned to play hockey next door. You know, the first time I was in this building was the early 80s. I lined up after school at Crestwood School to get ringside seats to watch a cage match between Davy Boy Smith, the Dynamite Kid, and Bad News Allens. Anybody remember Stampede Wrestling way back when? That was the early 80s, I think, 83 or 84. Anyway, it's really cool to be back here in Medicine Hat. Do you know the Premier is here this evening with us tonight? We have an amazing panel. I'm going to introduce them to you in a minute. They are, like you, regular Albertans who care deeply about this province. And we asked a diverse crowd to step forward who think differently on many of these issues, that would travel across the province and hear from folks like you, add a little context and perspective on some of the issues. So I hope that I'm able to call upon them all tonight so you get to know them a bit and we'll get to know you a bit. A few housekeeping rules that I'll run through. I know most of them don't apply to the great majority of you, but I have to say them anyway. Number one, we ask everybody to be respectful when you come to the microphones, which probably goes without saying. No disrespectful language or anything like that. Second point, we ask that you limit yourselves to one question. We've got 6 or 7 topics that we'll run through, and then we've got some time at the end for anything else that might be on your mind in our relationship with Ottawa that we can address. So we ask the questions are on topic, and I'll explain how that goes in a bit. We'll play a video, we'll talk about that one, and then we'll move on to the next. So before I explain all of that, I do think it's important that we meet the panel. So why don't we start with our Premier, Danielle Smith, the Chair of Alberta Next. We have MLA Brandon Lunty with us tonight. Hey, Brandon. MLA Tara Sawyer. Newly elected MLA in Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills. Dr. Benny Zhu is a registered acupuncturist for the last 30 years. We have Stephen Buffalo, my former teammate, President, CEO of the Indian Resource Council of Canada. By the way, Stephen's a scout for the Lethbridge Hurricanes, and he chose to be here tonight instead of watching Lethbridge lose to Medicine Hat tonight. Minister Rebecca Schultz is here, our Environment Minister in Protected Areas. Dr. Trevor Toome at the University of Calgary, an economics professor. The man knows numbers, I'll tell you that. Honorable Bruce MacDonald, former Alberta Court of Appeal Justice from 09 to 23. Dr. Aiken Osakwati, a family and emergency doctor in Didsbury. Melody Garner Skiba. Let me tell you, nobody knows agriculture like this lady in the food supply. We'll hear from her tonight. Sumita Aman, the chair of the Premier's Council on Multiculturalism, is on the panel. We have Andrew Judson from the Fraser Institute on the panel as well. And as I said, we have a few that aren't here this evening, but before we get started, I think it's appropriate that we ask the Premier of this province to come up and say good evening and set the scene for us. Premier?
Well, thank you so much, Bruce, for the very kind introduction, and welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here with us this evening, and I'm so very pleased to be here with the Alberta Next panelists. I want to thank every one of them for being here tonight. We were up north in Fort McMurray and Lloydminster last week. I know it was a little bit like planes, trains, and automobiles getting home, and so thank you for coming to Medicine Hat. It is a special privilege for me to be here in my own riding in the dynamic and growing city of Medicine Hat, along with the incredible MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat. Justin Wright is here. Justin, give a wave. So Justin and I decided to see Medicine Hat today like tourists, and we took the Sunshine Trolley, and it was amazing. I think every mid-sized city should have one of those because you get to see some amazing sights and incredible history. And it really is hard to overstate what this place means to our province. When you're known as Gas City in an energy powerhouse like Alberta, that is really saying something. And our tour guide told us that you got on Rudyard Kipling's radar screen. He called Medicine Hat, he said it had all hell for a basement. And I said, what do you mean by that? What are they suggesting about Medicine Hat? So it was because all the vast gas reserves in the area. That was the reason why he said that. But I have to tell you, it is so much more than that today. It is, I'd also call it Alberta in miniature. One of the things I love about representing the riding is I find that the issues that I see here are replicated all over the province. And one of the most beautiful things about Medicine Hat is they solve a lot of those problems, which helps us to be able to take those same solutions elsewhere. Well, every one of our biggest industries is represented here, as well as in the surrounding counties: oil and gas, agriculture, petrochemicals, manufacturing, tourism, film and television, tech. We visited Medelta Potteries as well, which you've got a brand new curator there who came all the way from Toronto, and it's just such a special, special place. There's very, very few places like it, probably in all of North America. But all of that is here. We even have some very exciting defense and military manufacturing companies here that I'm sure will play a crucial role in Canada's military for decades to come. This really is one of Alberta's most recognizable cities and an absolute gem in our province. And I do want to thank all of you for coming out to share your thoughts with us today and for choosing to participate in this crucial engagement process. I see that summer lasts a little bit longer down south than it does the further north that you go, and so there's lots of things you could have been doing on this beautiful evening. So thank you for sharing your time with us tonight and for having the conversation to help us with the Alberta Next engagement period, because it's going to help shape the future of our province. I would encourage you to go have a look at the last time the government did this with the Fair Deal panel back in sort of 2019, 2020. It came up with 25 recommendations that have guided our work for the last 5 years, all of which came from the engagement that they had at the time. So for instance, we had the Equalization referendum that came out of the Fair Deal panel process. The panel wanted us to reduce internal trade barriers, and we have done that across the country. They wanted us to create economic corridors, and we have signed many economic corridors agreements, most recently with Ontario and Saskatchewan, as well as with Yukon. They wanted us to challenge federal legislation in our areas of jurisdiction. I'm sad to report it seems like we've got a new piece of new litigation every single day. I think we're up to 15 lawsuits. They wanted us to establish a chief firearms officer, which we did. Create a presence in Ottawa, which we have. We now have an office in Ottawa. Diversify our energy sector, and of course we've done that in Spain with helium and hydrogen and lithium and geothermal and carbon capture, utilization and storage, and also relentlessly push for more market access, which we have, as well as referenda and citizen-initiated referenda. All of that came out of the Fair Deal panel process. And so that is just an example of the kind of ideas that can come from this kind of process. For the last 10 years, of course, we all know that Ottawa has taken direct aim at Alberta's core industries, from Bill C-69 to the tanker ban, the oil and gas emissions cap, which we know works as a production cap, the net zero mandates on electricity and also vehicles. In just the last 10 years alone, we calculate that more than $500 billion in global investment capital destined for our resource sector has disappeared. costing us hundreds of thousands of jobs and hundreds of billions in GDP and resource royalties that we could have otherwise used for healthcare, for education, and for public infrastructure. If Canada is to be a strong and unified country, it must include a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, able to pursue our own potential without being held back by our own country. Regardless of what each of us thinks about these issues or which path that we think is best, we Albertans must be able to respectfully debate and discuss the issues here with our friends and our family and our neighbours. And I know that if we do that, in the end, our province will find the very best solutions to the immense challenges that we face and come out stronger and freer than ever. I will always put my faith in Albertans to find the right path. I trust you, and I am looking forward to hearing all the great ideas that you have tonight. Thanks once again for being here with us.
Thank you, Pete. Well, we might as well start with a little trivia. If I said all Halford basement, what band would you say? Big Sugar, absolutely. Gordie Johnson. And for what it's worth, Medicine Hat Boy, I remember being here at a Big Sugar concert in like the early to mid 90s. Wow, very interesting. Okay, thank you, Premier. Thanks for getting us started here tonight. We have prepared 6 very short videos on topics that we know are important to you and important to this province. And so the topics are equalization and transfers, the Alberta Pension Plan, Provincial Police Force, constitutional changes, immigration reform, and provincial tax collection. And if you have concerns with anything else to do with Ottawa that didn't fit in there, there'll be time at the end and we'll address those too. But here's how it's going to work. So we will play a video of one of those topics. And while that video is playing, if that's the issue that you want to speak to, there are 2 microphones here. Just line up to the mic and we'll call on you after the video. You can ask a question or you can just make a comment if it's something that you want us to know. Like what we're trying to do, obviously, is gather feedback from Albertans as to what we might do about the situation with Ottawa. So if you have topics that are of concern on other issues, which people always do, this is Alberta Next, so this is about the relationship with Ottawa. We're not going to get into those tonight. However, Justin will be busy because he's here to address some of those if you have them. We've got staff from his office and from the Premier's as well. So again, that's about it. 45 seconds will be the time you have when you come to the microphone. I try to be gracious with that, within reason, of course, so try to stick to the 45 and let's get rolling. The first video tonight that we'll watch and then discuss is on equalization and transfers.
Our next topic is reforming federal equalization and transfers. Since 2005, Alberta taxpayers have contributed, on average, $23 billion more per year to the federal government in federal taxes than they received back in projects, benefits, and other spending from Ottawa. That's a net loss to Albertans of nearly $500 billion in just 20 years. Most of those redistributed Alberta tax dollars are spent by Ottawa and Quebec and other liberal-leaning provinces across the country. And part of that massive fiscal transfer out of Alberta comes through the Federal Equalization Program, which has seen Alberta pay over $67 billion into the program since 1957, while receiving back not a single penny since 1965. In 2021, Albertans voted in a referendum to remove equalization from the Constitution, but Ottawa completely ignored us. So what next? Alberta can't stop these federal transfers on its own. The Alberta government doesn't write a check to Ottawa each year, and we can't ask Albertans to stop paying their federal taxes. The fact is, fixing this problem will require political support from other provinces. One option that would be appealing to most other provinces is to have the provinces collect a larger share of overall taxes. This is how it could work. Currently, Ottawa collects over 60% of all the federal and provincial taxes that Canadians pay. The Ottawa bureaucracy takes its portion, with the remainder inefficiently and unequally distributed to the provinces. The dollars we do get back have a lot of strings attached, forcing us to run our provincial programs and build infrastructure the way Ottawa wants us to. No provinces want that, especially the big ones like Quebec, Ontario, BC, and Alberta. What if we cut out the middleman, and instead had provincial governments that are responsible for delivering health, education, and social services collect around 60% of all taxes, with Ottawa receiving the rest. Ottawa, in turn, would be able to end most transfer programs to the provinces, along with all the strings, bureaucracy, and waste attached to them. Quebec has already proposed having the federal government let provinces keep GST revenue generated in their provinces in return for ending the federal health transfer. Seems like a great idea. Why not apply that same logic to all federal transfers? Less money collected and wasted in Ottawa. Less federal transfers with only a modest amount of equalization for the smallest provinces and territories that actually need it. And more funds for provincial health, education, and other programs, without strings attached by Ottawa's politicians and bureaucrats. That seems like something most provinces could rally behind. So what say you, Alberta? Should Alberta take a lead role in working with the other provinces to reform federal transfers and equalization by having the provinces collect a larger share of overall taxes, with Ottawa collecting less? And are there any other strategies Alberta should be looking at to alleviate the massive federal fiscal drain to Alberta? For more information, visit alberta.ca/next.
Okay, that's the first topic of the evening. So again, we'll ask you to line up at the two microphones, and we'll get through as many as we can. So we kind of break it down by topic. If we run out of time on one, we'll extend it a little bit and keep going. And then at the end, if you didn't get to ask your question on the topic you wanted to, you can come on back and we'll do it at the end. Make sense? Ready to rumble? You want to kick us off?
Absolutely.
Go for it.
Thank you. Alberta's hope shouldn't abide when two cultures slip and slide, our values swept to the side. This is our great divide. Our culture shunned, the East has won. So bring on the sheriffs, enshrine our guns. A mother mounts for lack of eat, but elbows lift the pedos to their feet. And we released criminals onto our street. Muscles on boats from the USA, still we pay for CBSA's shame. Where do we go to place our blame? This is not about money, though I do dare show concern for our welfare. Taxes, taxes, say it twice. Who am I kidding? We pay it thrice.
Okay. Keep going. It's a great poem, but you're almost out of time.
Save us from our taxes, if not from the crown. Cut the red tape, all of it now. Make sure your taxes don't bring us down.
Thank you.
These topics of 6,
Yeah.
elected by choice.
Sorry, it's like the Oscars. They play the music for a while to try and say like. Anyway, thank you, creative, and we take your point. Thanks for coming out tonight. Let's go to this mic, and we'll try to keep it to 45.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm here to speak about. You said respect, right? I'm wondering how you define respect when you take $200 away from disabled people, make them jump through hoops. I'm standing here for my son, Danielle. Okay, so give me a minute, too, because I got more for you.
Well,
and I'll be as respectful. Bruce, give me a second, please. If you're going to stand up for Alberta, right, and for Canada, you have to listen to all of us.
Listen.
Okay.
Listen. You don't have to yell. I promise I'll let you talk. You don't have to yell. I promise I'll let you talk. Just to be clear, Alberta Next is the topic, right? We made that clear, right? So I see your point, but we're not going to let that happen, guys. So just try to keep it to the topics tonight. If you have an issue that's not on topic, Justin Wright or somebody will take that. But let's talk about our relationship with Ottawa and these topics, okay? Let's go over here. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening. Today, I went online to register so that I could attend this meeting. I don't know why I had to register, but anyway, apparently I did. And when I got on there, I found out that there were these surveys that we could take. And so I tried to take the survey, 6 of them, and it was difficult because you just had these arrows which had to be pressed, and you had to watch these propaganda videos before you were allowed to actually express your opinion on the questions that were being asked. I was quite upset with being forced to sit through this propaganda.
So can I ask you a question?
On this particular question.
On equalization and transfers?
On equalization and transfer, I wish I had counted how many times the word Ottawa was used in this little presentation that, again, we were forced to sit through.
Oh, okay.
And I'm getting tired, Ms. Smith, of listening to...
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Like, I know it's not hard, right? Like most everybody understands. 45 seconds, make a comment, ask a question. Let's try it over here.
Thank you. I do have a question.
Good.
In regard to the videos, excited about the Alberta Next Panel in July. I went online to share that I'm not in favor of provincial police force, that I want to stay on the CPP, etc. I was shocked and dismayed to find that I had to watch a 3-minute leading political infomercial. I've not yet been back on the website to even share my opinion. Language such as massive federal fiscal drain, Ottawa notoriously anti-Alberta, etc. And a minute 13 given to the pros, 37 seconds to the cons on policing. I know people who have refused to be here tonight because they feel the process is biased. My question is actually for Trevor Toome. You are a respected economist with a reputation for considering all sides of an issue. If someone at your university presented you with a research project that collected data only after participants were shown videos that leaned toward one point of view, would you find it acceptable, or would you be concerned about skewed data? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Okay. You came prepared. There's no question. Trevor, entirely up to you. Do you want to take it, or do we want to carry on?
Yeah. Maybe I'll just comment generally on this particular topic. That Canada is an incredibly decentralized country with provinces responsible for a great deal of the public services that we rely on, health and education. But it's also a very diverse country where economic strength varies widely from one part of the country to another. And so, you inevitably have redistribution through the federal budget. If you have uniform taxes, higher income locations will naturally pay more because of the higher income and higher corporate profits that exist in those locations. But that doesn't mean that federal policy isn't or is perfect, right? There's always trade-offs that need to be made. And we've been fighting around federal transfers from the very beginning of the country, from the anti-Confederates in 1867 in Nova Scotia, raising significant fiscal concerns, lobbying the federal government at the time to change transfers. We've had other provinces levying or launching lawsuits, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, today Newfoundland and Labrador, around the design of the equalization formula. So having regions raise concerns about federal transfers and seeking reforms to those transfers is entirely normal and a common feature throughout Canadian history. And so I think for Alberta to raise specific concerns around the design of the program is fine and natural, and something that the federal government historically would respond to, right? There are ways to improve equalization, how we treat resource revenues, how we treat hydroelectricity prices in the formula, and the list goes on. And it's forums like this where we can talk about the pros and cons of different ideas, and that's the best way to improve federal policy going forward.
Thank you. Hear, hear. Okay, thank you. Let's go over here.
Thank you for this opportunity. As you probably can see, I'm a senior with some health concerns. And over the last 60 years of healthcare, it has gone in several different directions. Back in the 1970s, we had hospital boards that were responsible and accountable to the electors of their districts. Then we went to the regional health authorities because it was going to be cheaper and give us more streamlined services. Then we went to the Provincial Health Board, and it was to do the same thing. That board was fired 2 times. Then we had a CEO, which was also fired. My concern is, how do I vote yes for collecting our taxes and distribute the equalization payments without a detailed plan as how the taxes will be collected, the suggested tax rate, and how the funds would be distributed. Medicine Hat has long been known for the forgotten corner.
Thanks, ma'am. Thank you so much. I think we did get to a question there at the end. Okay, so Premier, eventually going to call on you to make a comment on this subject. Do you want to do it now or do you want to wait a minute?
Well, I think the question was about the tax collection, which we are going to see a video on to kind of scope out what that might look like. And so why don't we leave the questions until that segment?
Okay, fair. Over to this microphone.
Hi, I'm a little overwhelmed. Everyone comes here with a written question. I'm just heard about this whole thing about an hour ago. So my question is, how soon can equalization actually be ended? Because I want it gone. I'm actually tired of it. I don't think it's fair. I appreciate everything that you do for this province. I'll be voting for you next election, most definitely. Can it actually be ended? Because I'm like, what's the word? I just don't feel it can actually happen. Ottawa has such a grip over us. It seems like there's nothing we can do. I don't want to say hopeless, but like it seems that way almost.
You strike me as somebody that has faith.
Yeah.
Okay, Premier, do you want to weigh into that debate some?
Well, jumping off what Trevor Choom was saying is that if you look at all of the responsibilities the provincial government has and the cost of delivering those programs, it's about 70% of all tax revenues raised. But we only have authority to raise about 40% of all the tax revenues raised. The rest goes to Ottawa, and then Ottawa makes political decisions about how and when to transfer it back and whether to transfer all of it back. That's what we're talking about in this video, is can we get a better alignment? And there have been different policies proposed in the past about how to transfer tax points so that you'd have better alignment, that we'd be able to use our own source revenue and rely less on transfers. The last proposal I saw was the federal government just transferring the GST to each of the provinces, which at the time would have been roughly equivalent to the amount of the federal transfers that we receive. I know Quebec is interested in having that tax point transfer discussion. BC, Newfoundland and Labrador, and Saskatchewan are. So we're beginning to get enough provinces. If you wanted to change it in the Constitution, you'd need 7 out of 10 provinces representing 50% of the population. But if you had some agreement among the provinces that we could do it a better way, that is how it has been changed in the past. It hasn't been changed since 2007, so it's probably time to do a major redo over how it's done.
Excellent. Great question. Thank you. Let's go. We're going to work on it over here.
Yeah, he kind of took a little bit of my question, but I'll see if I can build on it here a little bit.
Okay.
In your video clip, you're saying that we're looking at getting less transfer payment, not so much. But my question is, why can't we just go to zero and just take care of ourselves? You know, it's like then the authority that the feds are having, let's take it.
You would like to see us play more hardball, right?
Well,
yeah.
Look at the look at the European models. They're all different countries.
Yeah.
Okay, and they all look after themselves.
Gotcha.
So,
let's do it. Let's see if the Premier wants to take that. I think he kind of did in the last one, Premier, but do you have anything down?
I did. I mean, the reason you can't do it without the federal government agreeing to vacate some of that tax room is they now transfer us $12 billion a year because they overtax and then they trickle money back. And so we would need to have an agreement with them that they would reduce their taxes so that we can collect it, and then we would end the transfers. That's what we're talking about, and I think other provinces are interested in having that same conversation.
Thank you. Let's go over here to this next microphone.
Good evening. I'm from one parachutist to another. I certainly don't speak on behalf of all veterans, but I'm curious. A long time ago, I remember jumping over a drop zone in Edmonton. I was with 49 other men, and the last thing we had on our minds was whether Manitoba had a greater gross domestic product than Prince Edward Island or who got what. We were young, but I'd like to know, at that time, we all felt part of the same team. I was the only Albertan on board. I don't recall being treated any differently or more special because of my culture. The fact that I come from a province with a lot of oil didn't seem to make a difference. Why does it make a difference since 1978?
Okay. So
I can probably, I mean, I might dispute a little bit about whether these things used to matter. I mean, Brian Mulrooney lost government in part because of the CF-18 contract, which everyone agreed probably should have gone to Manitoba and ended up going to Quebec instead. So those are the kind of things that have caused tension, is the unfair treatment of the regions. They've caused tension ever since we became a province. And I think we've just gotten to a point now where when you look at the last 10 years of policies that target our oil and gas industry, that's why the level of tension has gotten to a level that I haven't seen it in a long time. It's part of the reason why we're trying to figure out what the solutions are.
Okay, one more on this one before we go to the next video, and I think it's over here.
Hello. I'm not an accountant, so I'm sorry, I don't really catch what's going on here with the transfer payments, this little video that we saw. Maybe if we had something sent to us that laid it out, people would understand it better. We would maybe understand what you're trying to do. But coming here today also concerned me that I was asked for ID when I came to the door. Like, why? What are we doing? I have to show ID to come in here and apply to get a ticket online. Is this not a free country?
Well, it sure is, sir. But we sell so many seats, and then we save them for the people that are RSVP.
Well, but you know what? Let people come in. Okay. Let people come in. Let them come in.
Do you have a comment on equalization?
Well, I do. I said I don't understand the little video.
Thank you. Awesome. Yep, just did. have a seat. Okay, so this is what will be interesting. Now, we know who came to the microphone, but watch how this question goes. Okay, we're going to ask a straw poll, and then we'll take the result, and then we'll go to the next video. So the question is, should Alberta take a lead role in working with the other provinces to reform federal transfers and equalization? Who thinks we should? Who thinks we shouldn't? Amazing. Okay, let's look at the next video and then we'll discuss it. If you want to speak to the Alberta pension plan and the possibility of it, you have any questions about what it might look like, that's the next video. Here it is.
Our next topic is creating an Alberta pension plan with the same or better benefits than the Canada pension plan. With a younger and more productive workforce, Alberta workers contribute about $3 billion more each year to the Canada pension plan than Alberta seniors receive in benefits. Alberta has the constitutional right to exit the CPP. And if we did, federal legislation says that Alberta would be entitled to a sizable share of the CPP assets that we could use to start our own provincial pension plan, so long as we guarantee comparable pension benefits for seniors. Quebec made the decision to start its own pension plan decades ago, and they have an agreement with Ottawa so that all retirees receive their full pension benefits, whether they worked in Quebec, retired there, or some mix of both. Alberta could negotiate a similar arrangement with Ottawa if we created our own pension plan. There are more factors to consider as well. Currently, virtually all investment decisions and management of the CPP is conducted by folks working in Ottawa and Toronto rather than Alberta. While the CPP's mandate is to maximize pension returns, in recent years, the CPP annual reports have shown an increasing focus on emissions reductions and DEI concerns, which do not always result in the highest rate of returns for the pension plan. CPP management has also become bloated and expensive. 20 years ago, the CPP had only 150 employees, with operating costs of $118 million. Today, it has ballooned to more than 2,100 employees, with operating costs of about $6 billion. If Alberta opted to commence its own pension plan, the fund would be managed out of Alberta by Albertans, and investments could be focused exclusively on maximizing returns rather than adjusting for carbon dioxide and DEI-related objectives. With that all said, the CPP has consistently generated healthy returns and is a stable and critical source of income for seniors in Alberta and Canada. So, what are the benefits of Alberta choosing to withdraw from the CPP to create its own pension plan? 1. A big upfront payout. Alberta would get back a significant lump sum by exiting the CPP. The chief actuary in Ottawa has indicated our share would be at least $140 billion. That's plenty to start and build a strong Alberta pension plan from day one. 2, better benefits for seniors, lower premiums for Alberta workers. Thanks to our younger, more productive population, an Alberta pension plan could result in Alberta workers paying lower pension premiums on their paychecks, or seniors enjoying higher pension benefits, or a mix of both. 3, local control and boosting our economy. An Alberta pension plan would be managed right here at home, creating more jobs and growing Alberta's financial sector. We would also be insulated from the economic and demographic decline in Canada. Our investment decisions could also be steered clear of ideological decision-making and instead remain focused on the long-term rate of return for Alberta pensioners. But there are some risks to consider. 1, uncertain payout. The CPP exit rules aren't clear in the federal legislation, and Ottawa is notoriously anti-Alberta with its decisions. So the size of the lump sum Alberta is offered could be lower than it should be. This could result in a lengthy court battle with the federal government, and it could lower our ability to increase benefit payments for seniors or lower premiums for workers. 2, long-term risk. As with any pension plan, if the plan is mismanaged or Alberta's economy and demographics fall behind Canada, premiums would have to rise in the future in order to guarantee our seniors the same benefits they enjoy today under the CPP. Regardless, as with Quebec, Alberta's government would still be able to guarantee that an Alberta pension plan provide the same or better benefits to Alberta seniors as they now enjoy under the CPP. 3, portability concerns. The Quebec pension plan and CPP have an agreement in place to ensure pensioners get the same single pension, regardless of where they worked or lived in Canada during their career. Alberta would expect a similar arrangement with Ottawa, but it is not guaranteed. So, should Alberta withdraw from the CPP and use Alberta's portion of the CPP to create our own Alberta pension plan? Or should we continue with the CPP as we do now?
We'll do the straw poll at the end of the discussion on a potential Alberta pension plan. And you, sir, start us off with 45 seconds. Go ahead.
The province took over provincial pension plans and gave them to AIMCO. AIMCO lost over $1 billion the first year. I don't trust the province to take over my Canada pension plan and do the same thing. So don't touch my pension plan.
Thank you for the comment. That is exactly how you present your opinion, even when you don't agree. Thank you, sir. Over here.
Hi there. I'm a mother of 4. I live locally. I have my own business. I work very freaking hard. I don't have time to be here. I'm also supervising SafeGrad tonight, so I'll be up volunteering until about 3 o'clock in the morning. Hopefully all those kids have fun and are safe. Do I think that you should have anything to do with our Canada pension plan? Absolutely not. What did you do with purchasing Tylenol during COVID? We still don't know because there's no accountability by this government. This is not a forum for discussion. We are being spoken at. We are being given propaganda videos and forced to be fed what you are offering to the Alberta public. It is not two-way. This is not how democracy works.
Well, I would challenge you that was sort of speaking at as opposed to, but it's just my observation. Go ahead over here.
Hi there.
Go ahead, sir.
I was just wondering here, there's about 2 years ago I did the pension plan survey, and I believe that the results were finally released recently this year, and it was 63 or 64% were against it. That's like 2/3 of Alberta. So if 2/3 of Albertans are against the Alberta pension plan, why are we still talking about it?
That's a great question. And there is context to that question. Premier, I'll let you jump in on that, please.
Well, just a couple of things. We have got new management under Stephen Harper at AIMCO, as well as our head of the civil service, who has moved over into AIMCO. They're closing down international offices. They're returning to a maximizing return strategy. They have shut down their DEI and ESG divisions. So they're doing exactly what I think people want to see, is focusing on returns. And we're now up to about $190 billion that we're managing. So we do have the expertise within AIMCO, which is independent, in order to be able to manage an additional fund. That would be one part. The other question?
The question was on survey results from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so like this is it's been difficult for us to really gauge where Albertans are at, because anytime you do a consultation like this, we get people saying do it, and that's what happened with the Fair Deal panel. That's why we went ahead and did the hired Morneau Chappelle to do the survey, and then when we released it, the initial reaction was negative, but there was a huge portion of people that were undecided. The most recent poll that we did had more people in favor than opposed, but again, a huge portion undecided. So we feel like we're just out one more time seeing, do we want to put this to the people for a final determination? You never get the real results of how people are feeling unless you go to a referendum, when you get everyone who has the ability to render their opinion on it. It's kind of different than if you do a poll that only has a couple hundred or a couple thousand people. That's the reason why we're still consulting on it.
Excellent. Okay, let's go over here. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a new person in Medicine Hat. I moved here about 5 years ago. I find Alberta, Medicine Hat, absolutely awesome. So, great place to live. But I will say no to an Alberta pension plan, and I will say no to separation. And for me, it's I'm mixing the two together, and it's on purpose. It's very specific to myself why I'm saying that. I retired with a great pension from Ontario.
What brought you to Alberta, sir?
What?
What brought you west?
The climate. There's a wonderful climate here. No humidity. I love the desert. But for me, my pension actually specifically states I must live in Canada 6 months out of the year.
Yep.
So that's a physical restriction or an absolute restriction on my pension. The other one is my pension, the actual values, defined benefit, is actually keyed to the CPP, not the Alberta pension plan, not to another pension plan. It is legally keyed to the Canada pension.
I gave you a little extra time because I asked you a question, but we're probably a minute and a half now. You good?
Yep, I'm good.
Excellent, thank you. So, Trevor, there's some technical questions and some numbers in there. I know I'm putting you on the spot because I usually go to Michael Binion on some of this stuff, and he's not with us tonight. So, can you add some context to that?
Yeah.
No? Yep. Okay, go. I'm looking at you, Trevor.
Okay. The light, it's hard to tell.
Okay. It's my halo, Trevor.
Yeah, maybe some quantitative context here. I mean, the video does lay out pros and cons, and I think this policy topic, like most others, does come with pros and cons, and it's important to keep them all in mind. Now, Alberta is the youngest province in the country by a pretty wide margin. That gives it an advantage in sustaining a public pension plan. Now, what that contribution rate would be for Alberta depends on a lot of factors. It depends on that initial payout and so on. My own estimates that I've put out, I guess about a year and a half or 2 years ago now, suggest the contribution rate might be 8.2% instead of the 9.9% that you currently see in the CPP. So that is a meaningful reduction in the contribution rate, and so that's a benefit to contributing workers. The cost of the policy is that there's some additional risks. So migration was laid out in the video as one potential source of future risks. We're a young province in part because a lot of young people move to Alberta. But what happens in 2050, 2060, and beyond? And so there is a risk there that Alberta ages more rapidly than the rest of the country, and then the contribution rate would need to increase. Another risk is that a provincial pension plan would have unilateral authority over it by the provincial government, whereas the Canada pension plan, you can't make changes to it without the agreement of 2/3 of the provinces representing 2/3 of the population. So there's some insulation against political risk there. So there's benefits and there's costs, and I think on this policy, it's important to keep them both in mind when evaluating those trade-offs.
Excellent. Thank you. Over here. This microphone over here. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm an Alberta senior, and I am very much in favor of an Alberta pension plan.
Tell us why.
Albertans have over-contributed to the Canada Pension Plan, and that money, it is my understanding, is supposed to be set aside for Alberta to use. And I want to know if that is true, where is it, and why can't we get it? And the return on the CPP is very low. And I think an Alberta pension plan under AIMCO or whoever could only be higher than the Canada pension plan.
Thank you. Okay, we'll add some
Only
comment.
just to say, Bruce, that's part of the problem, is that there isn't a pot of money set aside for Alberta, and that's one of the conversations that we're trying to have with the federal government, of trying to get a fix on, if we did create our own plan, what that transfer would be. But I know Andrew has a proposal for what we would be able to do to be able to get better returns out of an APP, which is kind of an interesting thought. Maybe he should go into that.
Andrew should, for sure, probably twice on this conversation. Andrew, go for it.
Okay, thank you, and good evening, everyone. A study was put out by the Fraser Institute that is available to you, and basically the argument was, with the reduced contributions that an Alberta participant would have, if those funds were then taken and then invested in a parallel separate program, that the two together would materially augment the pension benefit when the time came 20, 25 years out at the end of the working life. And so I think that is an important point, that as has been pointed out, the drop in contributions is material, and then taken and re-put into a private program, I think, is where we can see tremendous benefit for participants in Alberta.
Andrew, we may come back to you because I know there's more on this one. Let's go over here.
I have two comments.
I didn't cut your mic, honest.
I'm cut off and I haven't started? No?
No, you're not.
Two comments before I answer the question. The first is, when I registered to attend this evening, I thought that we were going to have an open discussion on topics, not be subjected to a sales pitch on what your government wants us to believe. There should not...
That's what we're doing.
We should not be listening to a sales pitch and then have to answer your question. Point number two, of course there is more money that goes into the CPP than comes back, because there are far more people working in Alberta than there are retired.
Exactly, let those who work.
That's it. That's a good point.
The answer to the question is absolutely not. I contributed for 45 years. The money in the CPP does not belong to anyone except me in my retirement.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment. Let's go over here.
Okay, thank you very much for letting me speak here. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for coming out. You're doing a fabulous job. I appreciate everything you're doing. Now that I have seen some of the Alberta Prosperity Project's figures come out, I just want to know what you, as I think there's 13 of you, that have a better solution to Alberta separating, or should we stay in? And what can you offer that's better than what Alberta Prosperity Project does? Thank you.
So, I'm not sure where you were on the question, but you're not in favor? Yeah. Okay, we got you. All right, we're going to go over to this mic. Go ahead here. Go ahead over here, so we're going to the next one.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you for providing us the opportunity to speak here and to answer some of our questions. My question is, we know that Alberta has been contributing a disproportional amount to the Canada Pension Plan compared to the benefits we receive from the plan. If we were to take our contributions and get all of the benefits of those contributions, why is it so much a concern? I'm asking those, I'm a senior myself and I'm receiving Canada pension. Why is it so much a concern that we wouldn't be getting as much from an Alberta pension plan compared to the Canada pension plan?
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Andrew and Premier, both of you can probably add to this one.
Well, I would say that if we're paying in $9 billion in premiums and our seniors are receiving back $6 billion in benefits, that's $3 billion year after year after year that's going to the federal government. That's why that, especially as it gets reinvested, that's why our contribution that would come back keeps growing. And it's going to keep on growing if we continue under this scenario for another 50 years. Now it's going to be another $150 billion more that we pay in than we get back in benefits. So that's, I guess, the value proposition is under the rules, you cannot leave the CPP unless you give the same or equal benefits. So that indemnifies and protects every person who's a current recipient. But the question would be is if something happened to change that mix, would that mean that our premiums would go up? I think that's unlikely. I think it's far more likely that we're going to continue on as we are overpaying and having no control over the management expense ratios that they have at the federal level.
Andrew, to this point, or do you want to wait a minute? Your call.
Well, I just want to state this is obviously a very emotional issue. This has been typical of the kind of conversations we've been having at all of our prior panels. And, you know, there are voices that would oppose any change to the CPP, and they're going to focus on the emotion and, you know, frankly, in the fear of it. But as we've been hearing tonight, you know, the math is straightforward. The only thing I'd share as well is in a prior panel, I think it was in Fort McMurray, we had a gentleman tell us from the microphone that his father, when he was a younger man, was a federal employee in the Federal Department of Finance, and he was told in the late 70s, son, you better get your own plan because the CPP is going to be bankrupt, it just won't work. And it turned out not to be the case, and the reason is this province, the energy industry, and particularly the oil sands and the contribution made then. So we've already bailed out the pension once.
All right, thank you, Andrew. We'd like to get through a couple of more for sure. Over here. Go ahead.
Yes, there is one question that has not been addressed, and it is the amount of unfunded CPP benefits or liabilities versus the assets in the CPP plan. I believe there's two methods of calculation, one based on a closed group and one based on an open group. And a closed base, we are in a $1.1 trillion deficit, from my understanding. Could somebody address that, please?
I bet somebody can. I bet it's not me. Trevor, Premier, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're right. The CPP is what's called partially funded, so it's not a plan that has accumulated enough assets on its own to pay out all of the committed benefits, and so that's why we need worker contributions to make up that difference. And so what the chief actuary does every 3 years is calculate what the minimum contribution rate would need to be, they think, to over some very long time horizon, 75 plus years, bring in enough money to make up for that shortfall. And that's the exercise that's done for the Alberta pension plan analysis too. And so the 8.2% contribution rate that I referenced earlier, that is, you know, reflecting the fact that the Alberta pension plan too would be partially funded, and it's the worker contributions that makes up that gap.
Right here. Go ahead.
Question. Quebec operates their own CPP, correct? Well, a question to everybody here is Quebec society and voters, are they crying that want to go back to under the federal umbrella? Of course not. It's very simple. For our grandchildren, we should definitely have our own control over that. And don't worry about, I'm not worried about my CPP, what I'm going to get out of it. It's not going to change. And even if it changes a couple of dollars, it's not going to change your life, period. Another thing, people talk about democracy, and people are complaining this and complaining that, all small stuff. The people of Alberta give Danielle Smith and her government a mandate to fix things. She got dealt a hand of cards, and a bunch of cards are messed up. Plus, on top of it, Ottawa stole some of those cards.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
You're not here.
Look,
These people here are not here. They're not here.
Sir, can I just say, sir, can I just say, like we went to a minute and a half on 45. I really want to give you more time. I do, but I can't. Yes, sir. We're out of time on this one, but Premier, anything to add, or can I move on? Okay, so watch, and if you didn't get to your question, no problem. Ask it at the end. You can come back to it. Here's the question: should Alberta create a pension plan with the same or better benefits than the Canadian pension plan? Who says yes? Who says no? And the yeas have it. The next video we will watch will be on the potential for an Alberta provincial police force. Here you go.
Our next topic is the potential creation of an Alberta police service to take over community policing from the RCMP. Today, roughly 80% of Albertans are served by local municipal police services, such as the Calgary, Edmonton, and Lethbridge City Police Services. However, Albertans living in most rural communities and a few mid-sized cities like Red Deer, Fort McMurray, and Airdrie are policed by the RCMP under Alberta's policing contract with Ottawa. And as is the case with most federal agreements, Alberta is getting shortchanged. To be clear, RCMP police officers and staff aren't the problem. They do all they can to protect us with the resources they have. The problem is Ottawa. Because the federal government is failing to provide the number of promised officers and resources to Alberta communities under the policing contract, response times are slow, staffing is stretched thin, and officers are often moved across the country at a moment's notice, resulting in little connection to the Alberta communities they serve. Furthermore, because of French language requirements, English-speaking Alberta officers do not qualify for senior RCMP positions. And ultimately, the RCMP's policing priorities are chosen by the federal government in Ottawa, rather than the provincial government in Alberta. Even the federal government itself has recently stated the RCMP should transition away from contract policing when current agreements expire in 2032. Ontario and Quebec have had provincial services for over 100 years. Why not Alberta? So, what are the benefits of Alberta withdrawing from the federal policing contract and creating our own provincial police service to provide community policing? 1, more local, more accountable. An Alberta police service would be run by and for Albertans, accountable to our province and not to the federal government in Ottawa. Police officers and support staff could build long-term careers in the Alberta communities they know and love. And any current RCMP officers and support staff working in Alberta would be invited to join a new Alberta police service. 2, safer rural communities. With local recruitment and stable placements, rural response times would improve considerably from where they are now, and coverage would become more reliable and tailored to each municipality and region. This is especially important in underserved rural Alberta communities. 3, flexible, made-in-Alberta solution. Most Albertans already have local police services. The province would assist larger communities like Red Deer, Fort McMurray, and Airdrie to transition to their own police services, while smaller, rural communities would be policed by the new provincial police service. And of course, nothing would change for Edmonton, Calgary, and other communities that already have municipal police services in place. But there are also potential drawbacks to consider. 1, startup costs. Establishing a new police service requires significant initial investment. Hiring officers, buying equipment, building training infrastructure, and training personnel. Ultimately, the startup costs could reach into the hundreds of millions over several years. 2, loss of some federal operational funding. The federal government currently covers 30% of RCMP contract policing costs. It is therefore likely that there will be additional ongoing operational costs for the province. However, municipalities would not be saddled with those costs. So, should Alberta create an Alberta police service to take over community policing from the RCMP?
Okay, we're going to, just a little bit different this time. Let's get a rural crime perspective from a couple of our panelists, or at least one of them. Maybe, Melody, could we start with you way down yonder? I know I said I'd come to you on agriculture, but I think you got a relative story to share too.
Thank you. I do. I have a very relevant story, and I will say this to begin with. I value the RCMP. I grew up with the RCMP in my area. We're about 35 minutes from any detachment. But when I grew up, there was police officers that would come to our table and have coffee. And when I got caught speeding, they knew Garner justice was going to be worse than their justice. So it was a phone call to my dad, and I was grounded for a month. But times have changed, folks. I was out this weekend with a group of girlfriends putting some training on horses. We came across a group of individuals that had been imbibing in some, I guess, fun holiday spirits, enjoying the river. Sounds lovely, except they trespassed across our land to get there. When I asked them about the trespassing, and I said, "What are you going to do about it? You need to leave." Their response is, "What are you going to do about it? Call the cops? Good luck." My response was, and unfortunately this is happening in rural Alberta, my scabbard is back on my saddle with a gun in it because I don't feel safe on my own land. So we have to do something to change that. And again, this is not about the RCMP. They just don't have the numbers to protect rural Albertans anymore. And I see that with firsthand experience from this weekend again.
Numbers are a big part of it. Melody, thanks for kicking us off. Go ahead. Over here, guys, this mic.
Hi, my question is, how can we trust your government to run an Alberta Provincial Police Force when you yourself, Ms. Smith, have commented that the court system, which is in place to protect citizens from government overreach, is bureaucracy and red tape?
Okay.
Might I just respond to that? You're talking about two different issues. Policing on the one hand and the courts. And the courts are a separate entity altogether. The police do their job, but when they arrest people and go and seek bail, that's in the judicial system. So you can't conflate the two.
Bruce, while you're speaking, a historical context on Alberta Police Force.
Okay, maybe a little bit of background would be helpful here, because a lot of people don't realize that Alberta had its own provincial police from 1917 to 1932. When Alberta became a province in 1905, its provincial police, in effect, were contracted from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. In 1916, the province decided in its wisdom to pass prohibition. And the RCMP were instructed by their superiors in Ottawa not to enforce this provincial law. Well, but the principle, let's just talk about the principle here. So Edmonton thought, well, our provincial police, or people are acting at it, should enforce all the laws. So it got to be quite an acrimonious debate between Ottawa and Edmonton, and then Ottawa decided on short notice to pull the RCMP, citing something to do with the First World War, as if that was going to make any difference. And the province was left on essentially no notice to create its own provincial police force. And they did that, and they had all sorts of challenges initially, particularly with the prohibition law, but the Alberta Provincial Police ended up being a fine force that had the respect of most Albertans. Unfortunately, 1932 comes along, the province is bankrupt, the Alberta Provincial Police had to be disbanded, not because they weren't doing a good job, because they were, but the province was broke. That's how the RCMP got back. But it's clear to remember that Alberta had its own first-rate provincial police force for 15 years.
Thanks, Bruce. Okay, this line.
Thank you. Thank you, Premier Smith and panel. Appreciate the work that you're doing with police forces. Myself personally, I live in Desert Bloom and have found out, not myself personally, but a lot of people that live in Desert Bloom, that the response time is about 45 minutes out there for RCMP. Part of the concern with that, of course, is that there's about 5 police that are on covering like 55,000 square kilometers. So it's not just Desert Bloom, it's also Dunmore, Hilda, various places like that that are seeing the longer response time for policing. Couple that with, I'm watching my time, sorry, but couple that with understanding that there will be a time from what I understand, that the RCMP won't be supporting provincial police. My question is, is there an opportunity as well for some of the local police forces, say Medicine Hat as an example, to help with a larger area? And, you know, what are some of the plans that way that we could speak to time as well as police forces helping out other greater areas?
There are proposed solutions for sure. Premier, do you want to talk?
Yeah, for sure. I know that Brooks and Newell County asked for one of our grants to be able to look at the policing options. And one of the things was that Medicine Hat Police Service was really, really helpful when there was some card lock theft, that the RCMP said nothing we could do. Medicine Hat Police said, you know what, we actually have some video of these folks. We could probably go after it. And they thought, maybe there is an opportunity for Medicine Hat to become a Medicine Hat regional policing. So they're in the middle of doing that. And I suspect that that's likely to be the case in some of the other mid-sized cities. As you saw in the video, Calgary has a police service, Edmonton has a police service, so presumably they could also do regional policing around each of their communities. Lethbridge, Medicine Hat as well, but others might choose a sheriff's detachment. We've got 2 municipalities that are looking at establishing a sheriff's detachment. It could be really any number of models. And there's also Indigenous policing as well that we're supporting, and that could be another option too.
Hey, perfect timing. Stephen, that's a whole new subject, but some perspective there.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Bruce and Premier. There's some First Nation communities in Alberta that have pursued and already have their own police force. The Tsuut'ina by Calgary, and of course the Blood Tribe, which ain't too far from here, and the biggest reserve in Canada. So there's opportunity for them to make a big change within their system and within their community, but it's really up to the leadership to move forward with that and work with the province.
Okay, let's get through a few more. Go ahead.
As already said, from 1917 until 1932, the government of Alberta ran its own police agency, with those years aligning with Prohibition, so I can imagine they kept themselves busy. Similarly, many towns and communities operated their own municipal departments, with the town of Redcliffe having one until 1992. In both cases, they were closed for budgetary purposes. What is to stop the province from once again getting in a budgetary blind and choosing to offload policing to others? Also, would there be supports to allow Alberta's smaller municipalities to once again have control on their own police force? Also, will there be any targeted engagement at youth? Finally, Premier, a minor correction. Kipling said Redcliffe was born with all health for basement. Medicine Hat was born lucky.
Ooh, I deserve that correction too. I had that wrong. By the way, Rudyard Kipling, If, is one of my favorite poems. You ever read it? It's fabulous. Premier, do you want to tackle this gentleman's set of questions?
Well, thank you for the correction. I appreciate that. I would say a couple things. We want the municipalities to lead this. So if a municipality wants to develop their own police force, we're providing a grant for them to pursue that. If they want to do regional police force in partnership with others, that's another option. If they want to use an adjacent police force, or if they want to use the sheriff's detachment, those are all options that they can consider, and we do want it to be responsive to them. One of the things that we saw, just to give an example of why Grand Prairie ultimately made the decision to go from RCMP to their own municipal police, is they first of all thought they'd be able to save money, and then they said, you know what, maybe instead we'll increase our number of our complement of officers. So they've gone from now having 55 officers. When they launch next year, it'll be 90, and they want to grow to 110. So they are going to be able to get double the policing. And they also had a call for resumes, and over 200 qualified resumes came in. So there is when people want to serve their community, that's going to be a different type of person who wants to apply for a local police force than somebody who maybe wants the excitement of going and working for the national police force. So that is an example to us that there really is a great local pool to draw from if the opportunity becomes available.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Very thoughtful. Over here.
Thanks for being here and listening to all this. I wasn't going to talk or ask a question. I wasn't thinking of it, but running out of time. As far as police services go, what's the difference between a provincial police force and what we already have in place with the rise in crime all over the country? You've got a 5-year-old sexually assaulted in her house.
That's awful.
A guy got shot in his house. A woman was stabbed at a park. And These people are getting off. They're getting back out of jail, back on the streets. And so Alberta Police Force, RCMP, what's the real difference? Like, are these people going to be able to stay in jail?
Excellent question. Excellent question. So, Premier, I know you can answer this. I just want to say this is part of the catch and release system that the Deputy Premier, the Minister of Public Safety, Mike Ellis, is always calling Ottawa out on. Is it not?
It is, and I wouldn't mind if Bruce would comment on this one too, but what I will say is we're watching to see what happens in the fall, because when a police officer was murdered in Ontario, Doug Ford got all the premiers to say we need to address this policy. Similar terrible tragedy happened in Manitoba, and Wab Kinew said we need to address this policy. So it doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum. All of the premiers are saying that if somebody is violent and a danger to their community, it doesn't matter what their history is. Get them behind bars and then get them the help they need from behind bars. Don't release them back into society. So I think that the Prime Minister has heard the plea from all of us. We'll find out. They go back into the Parliament on September the 15th, and we're led to believe that some of these bad policies are going to be reversed. But maybe I can turn it over to see if there's anything more that we could do from
yeah, absolutely. Justice McDonald?
Well, just to follow up on that point, the federal bail laws are simply that. It's it's under the Federal Criminal Code of Canada, and they really do, in my opinion, need to be tightened up. And hopefully the premiers will be able to convince the government in Ottawa that needs to be done. But it's quite a separate issue from the police, who are as frustrated as anybody. They do all this work. And, before they've driven out of the parking lot, almost these guys are out, or gals sometimes, I guess, too, are out in the street. So it's frustrating. It's just not right. And I hope the premiers are able to convince the powers that be in Ottawa that there needs to be a change. I think they're going to have a real challenge on that, but I have all the optimism that, led by our premier, that they'll be successful.
Go ahead.
Hello. I live in a small community that is in Premier Smith's riding, and when you call an RCMP, you're waiting for an hour to an hour and a half, probably minimum. We pay for 6 officers and for about 2 years, or for 8 officers, and we only had 6. There was 2 open vacancies for almost 2 years. I come up on a domestic, and I called the RCMP. I had to wait with a guy threatening me that was drunk for an hour and 15 minutes before somebody showed up. I would prefer to have an Alberta policing force that is local, that is able to respond quicker, because the local detachment of the RCMP is stretched so thin, and they've got such a massive landmass that it takes forever.
Are you in Dunmore, sir? Where's
Redcliffe.
Redcliffe, yeah, okay. Premier, you might have touched on this already, but in terms of the numbers, maybe it's worth reiterating.
What you're describing is, as Andrew was saying, it's not. I mean, it's worse than some other detachments. Mike went up to one of the detachments up north that should have had a complement of 23, and they had 5 or 6 officers. So there are vacancies all over the place. It's at 20 to 30% or higher, and it's all across the country. So at any given time, we're supposed to have 1,911 officers under our contract, and at any given time, it's only about 1,400. So that's part of the reason why we've had to augment, why we have the specialized border control team, the specialized scan team that shuts down drug houses, the specialized surveillance team, and the specialized fugitive apprehension team, is because we just are finding that those are going to help to fill the gap. But your experience is a very common one, and that's part of the reason why we're frustrated, is that they don't seem to be able to recruit or don't have the urgency to recruit, and it's creating the kind of situation you're describing.
Over here. Yes, and you don't want vigilantism for sure.
Now, if I just might follow up on the Premier's comment. The RCMP is having a chronic problem with recruitment for a whole variety of reasons. Look, I had an uncle and 2 great uncles that served in the RCMP back in the day, and they were proud to do it. But things have changed a lot. And the RCMP model simply isn't working in the 2020s. And My own personal opinion is that it's going to be easier for an Alberta Provincial Police Force or the Sheriff's Department to get local folks, qualified people to want to join than is the case with the RCMP. I think so. It's a systemic problem with the RCMP, in my opinion, as much as anything.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay, I did say we'd do one more over here.
Hi, I was originally raised in northern Alberta, so I totally agree. And just to get from your farm to town was 30 to 40 minutes. So I see where the problems are. One of my questions is, do we have an approximate amount that it would take to fund the police service? Could we not join with Medicine Hat, Grand Prairie, and all those that already have their police services for training there, or where do our officers go? And can't we do something in a provincial level about the court system?
Okay. Touched on some of it, Premier, but maybe a final word on it?
All of the above, yeah. I think that we do have excellent training services. I know I've gone through the training school in Medicine Hat here, and the classes are always full, and it's just wonderful to see the recruits. We also have, I was just up in a community just north of Edmonton. They have a training program. We are also planning on doing another training institute in Beaumont. Maybe Brandon Lunty might want to talk about that. That's his riding, so that they can do driver training and rifle training. But yes, we can do all of that and leverage the resources we have in each of the different police services. When it comes to what we can do with the provincial courts, the only thing I think we can do is to identify through policy what our prosecution prioritization would be. And so I'd be interested in hearing if I'm going in the right direction on this. But I mean, you saw a few years ago when Edward Maurice, he ended up shooting somebody who came into his house. The Crown declined to prosecute because he chose a jury trial, and the prosecution just said there's no reasonable likelihood of conviction here. And so there are certain things that I think you can do through policy when you identify what the priorities are. Let's go after the guys who are committing crimes with guns. Let's go after the gangs. Let's go after the organized crime. Let's go after the fentanyl labs and be able to prioritize that way. I think that that's within the bounds of what politicians can do through policy. You can't intervene in individual cases, but that may be one thing that we could potentially do.
Okay.
Can we do a volunteer police service is the question. There have been sort of citizens on patrol and sort of community crime watch, but the thing is, these guys are really bad dudes. These fentanyl labs and the connection potentially with organized crime. And one of the things that we found is that I think the RCMP have said there's 4,000 different organized crime gangs or cartels operating in Canada. And that is very dangerous. I wouldn't want citizens to be in that position. I don't want citizens feeling they have to take matters into our own hands. That's why we have to figure out the policing, the catch and release, and making sure that we're prosecuting the right people and get all of that working together to get back to the kind of safety that we used to have historically.
If we do start one of those forces, I'm lining up behind Stephen Buffalo. That is my plan. I'm telling you right now.
Bruce,
okay, I'm just going to save your... Sorry, do you want one more comment?
Well, I was just going to say the one thing that we didn't touch on that was raised in one of the earlier questions, and Premier, you often do speak to this, is about the white paper that came from the federal government and the reason, and maybe you want to speak to it a little bit more, but essentially they had a white paper come out just in the dying days of Trudeau's prime ministership.
I probably should have started there because they've been telling us behind the scenes that they don't really want the RCMP to be involved in contract policing anymore. And we kept on pushing them. When are you going to go public with this? You may have seen what happened in Surrey. In Surrey, they started down the path and then tried to turn around, and then the province said, no, you got to go ahead with it. And it's because they've been telling us behind the scenes that they're going to be pulling out of this when our contract comes up in 2032. And then when Justin Trudeau left, he finally released the white paper that we knew existed, and it said exactly that. Because and maybe that's the way to think about it, is that if you make the RCMP more like the FBI so that they can focus on those cross-border between provinces, but cross-border with the United States, if they can focus on those kind of crimes, money laundering, cybersecurity, foreign threats, terrorism, cartels, maybe that's a better use of our most highly trained police force. And I think that that's the conversation they're having at the federal level.
What a great conversation. Minister Schultz, thank you for reminding us of that last point. Okay, here's the question. We've got to go to the next subject. So here's the question. Should Alberta create an Alberta Police Service to take over community policing from the RCMP? Who says yay? Who says nay? The ayes have it. And I make this point every time we do one of these panels. I know you would all agree. This has nothing to do with the officers and the great people of the RCMP and has everything to do with the bureaucracy and the management of it. So thank you. The next video is on constitutional changes. Here it is.
Our next topic is Alberta taking a lead role in working with other provinces to pressure the federal government to amend the Canadian Constitution to empower and better protect provincial rights. The Canadian Constitution, including its Charter of Rights of Freedoms and sections on the division of powers between the federal and provincial governments, is foundational to our democracy. The enforcement of the Constitution by governments and the courts ensures our rights and freedoms are protected, and that our provincial and federal governments generally function as they should. But no document is perfect. Some things that made sense 150 years ago may no longer make sense today. That is why the Constitution contains an amending formula that permits the Constitution to be altered should enough provinces and the federal government agree to it. Over the last decades, several outdated and unfair problems with the Constitution have been identified, but no tangible progress has been made to fix them, due primarily to a lack of federal and provincial leadership. Examples of proposed constitutional reforms include the following. 1. Amending the division of powers to indicate that core areas of provincial jurisdiction, including over natural resources and health, are immune from federal legislation, and to also ensure that in shared areas of jurisdiction, such as agriculture and immigration, provincial laws prevail over federal ones. 2. Imposing constitutional limits on the federal spending power in areas of provincial jurisdiction, including a provincial right to opt out of federal spending measures with proper compensation should they so choose. 3. Adhering strictly to representation by population in the House of Commons. Right now, those living in smaller provinces are greatly overrepresented when compared to those living in larger ones. 4. Either abolishing the Senate entirely or having it actually represent provincial interests as originally intended by mandating an elected Senate with the same amount of senators representing each province. 5. Allowing provinces to appoint their own King's Bench and Court of Appeal justices, rather than having those appointments made by the federal government. 6. Expanding the Supreme Court to allow for more justices from Western Canada and making prior service on a province's Court of Appeal a mandatory requirement of becoming a Supreme Court justice. 7. Eliminating the Ottawa residency requirement for judges on federal courts to ensure more Western Canadian representation. And 8. Mandating provincial approval of the appointment of a lieutenant governor to a province by the federal government. There are, of course, many other potential constitutional amendments that are worth discussion, but this is a start. So, should Alberta take a lead role in working with other provinces to pressure the federal government to amend the Canadian Constitution in order to empower and better protect provincial rights? And if so, which of the amendments discussed or other proposals should the Alberta government advocate for?
I just heard somebody say yes. Shall we shut down debate on this one? Justice McDonald, can I ask you to kick this one off? Because there are some things in there that you could probably add context to for sure.
Well, okay. Sorry. Under the Constitution Act 1982, the amending formula is contained in, I think it's Part 5. And the two main rules are, one's in Section 38, which is the one that is the default rule. It's the normal rule that says if 7 provinces with 50% or more of the population move to amend the Constitution and the federal government agrees, then there can be a constitutional amendment. And the other is Section 41, which requires unanimity of all the provinces. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but hearing a couple of the examples here. The ones, for example, of the provinces should be able to appoint their own Superior Court judges, that is the Court of Appeal and the Court of Queen's Bench. I could see all the provinces getting on board with that because they would probably want the power to appoint the judges that are in their courts. And similarly, with the lieutenant governor, that requires unanimity. But again, I can see a real case that all the provinces want the ability to appoint the lieutenant governor to their province. So, you know, I think the formula is there, but it takes the will of the provinces then to push it on to Ottawa to make these things happen.
All right, let's start at this microphone this time.
Hey, boss. The Constitution of Canada of 1982, in the first section, clearly states that the federal government, using reasonable justification, can change the legislation. The federal government has been stealing Alberta's lunch money for 120 years. The other provinces either don't care or are too afraid. So I have an economic strategy for you that will get you a lot of cooperation with the other provinces. Mrs. Premier, take us the hell out of Confederation. Now.
Go ahead, sir.
My question is for the Premier. And Western alienation is not new. It goes back to when the country was formed. They called us hewers of wood, drawers of water. I had to look it up. Canadian economist Harold Innes, 1930, in his book, described Western Canada that way. This all came to a head in 1981 when Trudeau 1.0 savaged Western Canada with NEB. So we fought back with failed Senate reform, trying to make the Senate equal, elected, and efficient. That failed, thanks to the Easterners. So then we thought, well, let's do provincial Senate elections. We'll elect senators in Alberta, and the feds will appoint them. But various Liberal governments have declined to do that. We also had to fight through failed Meech Lake Accord during this time period. Then I'll go to Trudeau 2.0 and all his anti-Alberta legislation, so I'll skip by that. Carney talks big but does nothing. All that legislation is still on the books. And equalization, as you pointed out, a big drain on Alberta. So my question to the Premier is, it's time to stop flirting with separatism and make it official.
Okay. Go ahead.
I feel like I should channel Michael Binion here because I think you've very well articulated some of the frustrations that we've had in trying to change the way the country works. But there have been some successes. When you look at what Alberta used to be, we used to be Rupert's Land, and then we became Northwest Territories, and then we became a province, and then we got the Resource Transfer Act. And so we have slowly but surely, and Michael calls this responsible government, as we get larger, as we get more mature, as we develop our economy, we take on more and more responsibilities. Quebec is kind of at the far end of this. They are twice our population, although not twice our GDP. That's one of the frustrations we have. But that's part of what they've done, is that they collect their own personal income taxes, their own pension, their own immigration, their own police force, and they press the federal government every single time they try to interfere with provincial jurisdiction, because they are saying, we are this responsible level of government, leave us alone. So that's what we're asking, is should we be going down that same pathway that Quebec has gone? More recently, I was reminded recently that Quebec did a unilateral change to the Constitution. They got the federal parliament to agree to call them a distinct society. If you remember, that was one of the issues in the Charlottetown Accord and Meech that they were discussing. So that occurred. And then Nunavut. It not only became a separate territory carved out of the Northwest Territories, but they've just got a major devolution agreement so that they also can take more control over the resources. So there are these examples of when you press it and you put these items on the table, you can have a negotiated agreement to take on more and more of the powers. I understand the frustration about could we ever have a Meach-style or Charlottetown-style agreement where it goes to a referendum. Maybe we're all too scarred from how badly those turned out the first time, but there's no reason why we can't at least identify the areas I think that we want to try to find the change. And I think, as Bruce has mentioned, many of the things in this video are things we could do without constitutional change. And so it just is a matter of some political will.
Excellent. Andrew, be ready. I'm going to come to you in a few minutes, but let's get to some of the mics. Go ahead.
It is my personal view that the governing model in Ottawa is 1867 Canada, and that's Ontario and Quebec. The latest incident with the Chinese EVs and the prairie canola is a good example. We need constitutional change if we're going to survive as a nation. The late Premier Bourassa of Quebec advocated a Canadian version of the EU because Canada is diverse geographically, economically, politically, and culturally. Now, the question arises, how do you get the parties to the table? You need a crisis. And I think we can create one. Two major events in Canada established a free flow of commerce. 1885, the CPR was built, finished in construction. In the 60s, the Trans-Canada Highway. Premier Legault's maple syrup, Premier Ford's autos freely crossed the country. But Mr. Legault says now you can't build a pipeline and no oil and gas. Premier Smith, direct your bureaucracy to build toll gates on the highway and the railroads. No maple syrup and no autos passing unless you pay the toll. What you will have is a crisis in the country.
Okay. We'll start drafting that policy right away, sir. Nothing could go wrong. Go ahead.
Hi, Caleb Orge. I like to hear the quiet parts out loud. Is the long-term goal of this to move Canada away from being a federation and toward a union of states like the US or the EU? And considering that Ottawa absolutely will not go for that, and the French lost their appetite for it 30 years ago despite being notoriously treacherous, what extra legal means are actually on the table when this fails?
Okay. Fair question.
Well, I think there's lots of models. I mean, as has been mentioned before, we are one of the most decentralized federations in the world. And so there's this constant tension of Ottawa wanting to assert more national priorities and provinces resisting. And I think that that's kind of the dance that we've done our entire history. So do we do an EU model? In the EU model, they actually take a very small amount of contribution from each of the jurisdictions, but they have a lot of control over regulation. And that's one of the things that has caused tension in the EU. Andrew was just suggesting maybe Switzerland is the model that we look at. If you look at Switzerland, they have a lot of direct democracy. I think they've got 23 cantons, and there's a lot more regional focus on their government. There's lots of models to look at, but I certainly wouldn't give up the idea of decentralization. I think we've got a very decentralized federation, and the question is, should we be taking on more of those powers?
Great question, though. Thank you. Over here.
Is it on? First of all, thank you very much for what you're doing. It's lovely to see democracy in action. I know it's messy, but it's the best thing we have.
Yes, absolutely.
My comment about the Constitution, the amending formula is what I chiefly am complaining about. 7 of 10 provinces, never mind the 50%. 7 to 10 provinces means you have to get one of the maritime provinces. They comprise 7% of the entire population of Canada. They're very regional in their outlook, not to blame them, but to try to make sure that one of them comes on side for an amendment is ridiculous. The provinces can discuss with the federal government what changes are, made, and then it should be a straight vote across Canada. We can elect a federal government every 4 years. Doing that, why can't we just amend the Constitution with the same method?
I wish we could amend the federal government we elect every 4 years. Andrew?
Well, I was reminded of this last lovely long weekend here in Alberta that in the BNA Act of 1867, we think about the history of this, In the preamble, the foundational document of our democracy and government, in the preamble it says that it's in the interests of the provinces. That it's in the interests of the provinces. So I think there may have been an optimist in the federal government at the time, not thinking they would get too far into this, but this whole conversation, and 1, 2 down from now, we'll be talking about taxes, where this is blurred in a little bit, tax collection. Bringing the federal government back into its lane, reasserting the authorities that are already present for the province of Alberta and all the provinces around these matters, including the amendment formulas that are in place. So reminding the federal government of their obligations of collaboration with us, that it's in the interests of the provinces to form this Dominion of Canada.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead, sir. Yep.
All right. Good evening. We've heard tonight several times about cooperating with other provinces, and we've heard about this for, probably years before this as well. You have an NDP government on the west of us. We have one cooperative province to the east of us, Saskatchewan. Beyond that, you've got another NDP. You've got Doug Ford, which might as well be an NDP. And then you got the rest of the people that have their hand out in the Eastern Maritimes. So I think that is actually a pipe dream. Now, you've been given a mandate by the people of Alberta, a strong majority government, all of you. And all I've heard is talk, 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 talk. We have been through these panels. Drew Barnes went through all this in the Kenney government, and they presented their findings. Mm-hmm. And I think this is just rehashing, and are we just going to continue to talk for the rest of your mandate, or are we going to see some concrete steps forward and no more talk?
Okay. Thank you. Well, look, I can take that one. All I would say is part of what we're trying to do is find out what's on the mind of all of you. And this gentleman over here said democracy is messy. It is, but it's worth hearing what people have to say. So that's what we're trying to do, trying to get to as many of you as I can. So thanks for your comments. Over here.
Thank you. I'm LeVar Payne. I'm the former Member of Parliament for Medicine Hat, Brooks, Tabor, and area. And I'm also on the Premier's board. And I do have some concerns regarding the panel, as stated by the previous individual. And the reason I have those concerns is because Alberta already has the power, authority to start its own pension plan, to start its own police force, to collect taxes, set immigration. However, Alberta has no authority, no ability to actually do anything about equalization or the Constitution. And the reason I say that is because Quebec, Ontario, the Maritimes control the constitutional changes, and they have the majority in the House of Commons and the Senate.
Okay.
So in terms of the referendum question, I know the Alberta government can confuse voters if in fact they have more than one question on the referendum. So my question is, will Alberta have only one question on the independence of Alberta on the referendum?
Thank you, LeVar. Premier?
Well, we're waiting to see if either of the petition campaigns gathers enough signatures. I think there's only one that's gathering signatures at the moment. And the other one is in a court process that isn't going to be completed until, I'm not sure when, I think it's going to the court on November the 5th, November 19th. But what we're looking at is, I know, LeVar, you're very passionate about policy, as are most people who get involved in politics. And I would say the ideas that we've put on the table for consultation are ones that have been talked about in political circles for years, probably decades. But I don't know that the general public has really been as engaged in the conversation as those who are really involved in partisan politics. So part of this process is saying, hey, this is what the political folks are talking about. Is this of interest to the general public? And that's what we're trying to gauge by doing the survey, having these kind of forums, is to see if there's an appetite to go forward with any of them.
Okay, straw poll question. Should Alberta take a lead role in working with other provinces to pressure the federal government to amend the Canadian Constitution to empower and better protect provincial rights? Yes. No. Okay, the next video. Here we go. Immigration reform.
Our next topic is Alberta taking more control of the immigration system to counter Ottawa's open border policies, which are driving up the cost of living and are not aligned with the needs of Alberta's economy. In just over 100 years, Alberta's population has grown from a few 100,000 farmers, ranchers, and First Nations peoples to a province of over 5 million, with one of the most prosperous economies in the world. This great success story would not have been possible without new Albertans moving here from all over the world. That is why Alberta has always welcomed newcomers looking to contribute to our province's economic success and unique culture. And we always will. However, as all Canadians intuitively understand, the number of newcomers entering the country each year needs to be sustainable, and everyone wanting to come should be committed to upholding the Canadian values of hard work, love of freedom, and peaceful coexistence. Sadly, Justin Trudeau's Liberals upended Canada's immigration system for over a decade by instituting an open borders policy that permitted millions to enter Canada each year, often without any sort of proper vetting, job prospects, or needed employment skills. The results have been disastrous. Housing prices have skyrocketed. Unemployment keeps increasing as immigration outpaces job growth. And sadly, many of the divisions and disputes that plague other countries have begun making their way into ours. Further, Ottawa has ignored the request of Alberta to cut refugee claimants and student visas, and instead permit Alberta, like Quebec, to select a more sustainable and targeted number of economic migrants better able to contribute to our province's economy. What can Alberta do about the situation? Quite a bit, actually. You see, under the Constitution, immigration is a shared area of responsibility between the federal and provincial governments, which makes sense. Essentially, the federal government gets to decide who they let into Canada, but it's up to the provinces to provide the vast majority of the social programs that newcomers need. So obviously, we should have a say about who is coming here. If Alberta isn't satisfied with the number or economic qualifications of newcomers moving to our province, we may have the option to withhold provincial social programs to any non-citizen or non-permanent resident who does not have an Alberta-approved immigration status. This would likely encourage more sustainable numbers of immigration overall, while supporting the entry of newcomers that can contribute to our provincial economy. If Alberta went this direction, Ottawa could decide to fight Alberta on this issue in the courts, and there would be some additional costs in taking a more hands-on approach to immigration. However, much, if not all of that cost, could be offset in corresponding savings to our social programs. So, should Alberta take more control of the immigration system in this way, or continue with the status quo? And how can our province convince Ottawa to act more responsibly with their immigration policies in the future?
Some panelists we haven't heard from tonight. I promised I wanted you to meet every one of them that's given us their time here for the last couple of months. So maybe I'll ask Dr. Aiken to kick us off on this issue, first generation Albertan.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Aiken Osakwadi. I'm a family doc. I moved into Alberta about 10 years ago to one of the most wonderful towns in Alberta, the town of Oyen. I've got my mayor here, Doc Jones, the awesome mayor of Oyen. I love Oyen too, yeah. And you know, that's the beauty of Alberta. We offer opportunities for people that want to better themselves, that want to improve themselves, that want to contribute to a wonderful society. And I think that's the major challenge that's happened with immigration in the last couple of years has been, it's moved away from an opportunity where it should work for both parties, both the people, the established population, and the new population coming to Alberta, to an open border immigration. From 2019, we've had a massive amount of immigration, unvetted, uncontrolled, unregulated. And it's becoming very challenging now with pressures being put on healthcare, education, and social services. And all we are looking for is sustainable numbers and an immigration system that vets people, that ensures that they're coming to contribute and not to take away from the system. And I think, you know, I raise my hand and say Albertans are some of the generous, most kindest people in the world that extend grace to newcomers, but it should not be at the expense of people here. There are young people here that are struggling to get jobs, that are trying to get opportunities, that are struggling to get ahead. And we need to return to fairness, balance, and back to allowing the provinces to determine the level of immigration and the type of people they want to come to the province. Thank you.
Thank you. Start over here.
Premier Panel, thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate Dr. Usukata, and if I said your name wrong, your comments and the video, but it does show how weak our hand.
Yeah.
I encourage everybody to look what's happened to Europe with immigration. It is the canary in the coal mine, what's happening. They brought in people with an ideology that is violent, lots of crime. Our society does not support rape and pedophilia, but they have brought those people in. Canada has as well. We brought in some great immigrants for sure, but we brought in the worst. And I say to you, how can you deal with Prime Minister Carney in good faith when he has gotten a thank you letter from Hamas, a terrorist organization, and 2 other prime ministers as well? How can we believe that that's going to work out?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. So the numbers are actually staggering, and maybe you're not aware of how it works federally and provincially. And Premier, I know you can add context and explain this, what we have control over when it comes to immigration compared to the federal government.
Well, there's a couple things, and I know you read the Constitution probably more than most, but Section 95 is of particular interest to me because the way it's written is it says that the provinces shall make laws respecting immigration, and the federal government shall make them from time to time. And I think that we flip that on its head. I think the federal government controls the process from beginning to end, and then we try to beg and plead to get a certain number of economic migrants or entrepreneurial migrants, and we keep getting told no. So I'm prepared to challenge what that means under the Constitution. I think that we should control our immigration from beginning to end, and I'll tell you what I think that looks like. We have to go back to a more normal level of immigration. Between 2009 and 2019, it was about 0.6% of the population. So overall, Canada was about 275,000 a year. Last year was 1.8 million. And so if you're beginning to wonder why this is being talked about more, why there's more tension, why people are frustrated and angry, it's because that there's such a mismatch from the way things used to work pre-COVID to the way they ended up working post-COVID. So if we could go back to a more normal level of immigration, that would mean Alberta, with 5 million people, we'd maybe accept 50,000 a year. 2/3 of them would probably be economic migrants. And then we'd also choose a smaller number of asylum seekers, international students, and family reunification. And then the federal government should be the ones who choose citizenship. And so that's how I'd like to see it. That's what we're trying to gather feedback on, is should we be pursuing that strategy? One more thing I'd say to you, because I was just telling Andrew this as well. One of the other worries that I have is the number of people who come to Alberta just for our social programs. I know we're moving down a pathway of having a more durable healthcare card, and there's a reason for that. It's because let me tell you why. We have got 4.8 million Albertans registered, and we've got 600,000 more Alberta ID cards, more Alberta healthcare cards than we have people. So we need to figure out why that is, and we need to make sure that we are protecting Alberta taxpayers so that we are not paying for expensive health care for people who don't even live here or who are only here to take advantage of the social programs and never pay in. So I know that there's some questions about why we're doing that. That's why we're doing it. So those are the things that we're trying to talk about, is do we need to get a better handle on the number of people coming here, and do we need to get a better handle on who gets access to the social programs that are very, very expensive to pay for.
Right here, sir. Go ahead. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, me again. I apologize for coming up again real quick, but I know everyone on the panel knows, but I'm not sure everyone in the audience knows. 2 out of every 3 Canadians have at least one foreign-born grandparent. The first gentleman in the last question to stand up and yell separation now is Ian. He's from Great Britain. Without immigrants, Canada would have a lower population than it did in 1973. We're a country of immigrants. Now, I do say, vet them, let's make sure that we get the right people in the country. But without immigrants, our economy collapses. What will we do in Alberta to make sure that if Alberta does have more control of the system, we bring in people who will help the entire country, starting with Alberta.
Yeah, no, listen, absolutely. What the question is up here, is it too many too fast? And should we have more control over what we're doing? I think that's what the Premier spoke to, right? I'd like to ask a couple panelists a question, Premier, but did you want to? Okay, so Dr. Benny, could you explain what things were like for you when you came here 30 years ago and what you and your community see now when it comes to immigration?
Certainly. Thank you, Bruce. I'm Dr. Benny Xu. So I come from a traditional Chinese medicine family. 33 years ago, so my father brought us over, to Canada, and we settled in Calgary. We never left. Back then, acupuncture was really, very much unheard of to many people. And today, so acupuncture is a regulated health profession under the Health Professions Act. So compared to 33 years ago to today, this past few years of open door immigration policy, so, we got a lot of newcomers, even I know them, a lot of them actually from China, just couldn't find jobs. And I got a lot of employer friends that couldn't find employees. So, it seems like there's a mismatch between the needs and the talents we brought it in. And I think we need a smarter immigration system so, we can better match the talents and the needs of the employer. So the immigration system should never be a multiplying number system. That's something I think we should look at it. And I believe we have a pretty smart government here in Alberta.
I should give him more time. Let's start over here.
Thank you. I'm concerned that it's very easy to, I was going to say toss out the baby with the bathwater, but that's not politically correct. It's really easy to scapegoat immigrants, for example, for all sorts of things that they are not particularly responsible for. And I'm concerned that this discussion is edging in that direction. I'm not sure that the large number of people with Alberta healthcare cards is because of a flawed immigration system. People don't immigrate to Alberta, they immigrate to Canada. They go in Canada to places where they can find jobs, social services, education, and their own communities, speaking their own language and supporting their own culture. That's why we have immigrants in Alberta.
Thank you.
Sorry, if I could just respond to that, Bruce. In 2023, Canada had the fourth largest increase of population of any country in the world, and that was driven exclusively by immigration. Now, we all know immigration properly handled is a true asset, as it has been throughout most of our history, but that's not where we are at now. And in fact, for the last, I think it's 5 or 6 quarters, Canada's GDP per capita has declined. That means, although the economy might be growing a little bit because of all the people coming in, we are collectively getting poorer. So the federal government has done, I'm going to suggest, a very poor job in the immigration system. And the gentleman that was talking earlier about a crisis being the opportunity, well, it may well be on hand, and I can see perhaps a lot of pushback from other provinces wanting to make some changes over the system that would benefit them as well.
Thank you, Bruce. How about over here? Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, my name's Amanda. I am from the fabulous city of Brooks.
Hi, Amanda.
Everyone should appreciate that, just so you know. I'm really concerned about the way that this question is framed, and it actually goes with the gentleman that just spoke before me. This idea of should Alberta take more control of immigration to counter Ottawa's open border policy. The video uses language such as unvetted, open borders, and savings to social programs, which is misleading, and it's dangerous. This
sort of what's happening.
So that's what's happening even in this room. That's the concern. So this kind of messaging encourages anti-immigrant sentiment at a time that we need to be building understanding and not fear. The reality is, people don't come to Alberta to exploit social programs.
Okay, I need you to wrap it up, okay?
Yeah, I can. It's the booing that takes into my time here.
Well, you were over before, but carry on.
Okay, so immigrants aren't the ones overusing our social programs. If you work in our social programs, you would know that people come through immigrant streams aren't eligible for social programs.
Do you think the number is right now that we've got the right amount of people coming?
I think the number.
Sorry, go ahead. Yes or no?
The number isn't great.
Okay.
But the tone is what changes.
Gotcha. And I appreciate how you delivered that. A little lengthy, but thank you. So just know that the discussion up here is just on all of these issues. How might we manage them better from Alberta's perspective? Would we be better off to have control as opposed to Ottawa? Over here.
Hi, can there be stricter policies in place that limit the time someone who hasn't paid in can stay on our social programs, to encourage them to get jobs instead of just using social programs for years? Because it's happening.
Okay. Premier, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to go over to Samita?
Well, we do have a real problem that we're seeing that in the past, our level of tax revenue used to increase faster than inflation plus population growth. And so we felt that if we limited our year-over-year spending to inflation plus population growth, we'd be able to grow our revenues faster. And that's not what's happening now. And it is the case because I can counter it every day. And we hear about it in our constituency office. People are coming here because they hear that our social programs are better. So they are moving here in order to be on our social programs. There is an example of something that worked really well. And if you look at the settlement of Ukrainian evacuees under the QIT system, somehow Alberta managed to settle 70,000 Ukrainians in the course of about 2 years through 200 different volunteer organizations, a huge diaspora, Ukrainian community. And I think the first wave of people who came through had well-paying jobs and maybe had a little bit of means. But when we looked at whether they were using social programs, of the 70,000, it was less than 2,000 that were using any kind of social supports. So that's, I guess, what we're trying to figure out is, are people, is there a way for us to be able to match those who are coming to the province with the jobs that are available, the skills that they have, so we set people off on a pathway of success. We've had lots of experience with being able to do that, but when you end up with 150,000 people coming a year versus 50,000 a year, which has been our experience the last 3 years, it becomes overwhelming of all of our systems. You're seeing it in classrooms that are overcrowded, complexity in classrooms, English language learners. People can't find a family doctor. We can't build homes fast enough. There just is a pace that you can keep up with. So we're looking at all of those things. But we feel that if we had the ability to identify our own labour market opinion, manage our own work permits, do our own provincial nominees for who would become a permanent resident, that would very likely be geared towards finding those who had the ability to work in the jobs that are available. And I think we would end up having them be taxpayers first before they needed any of the social services.
Could we have the Premier's Chair of the Council on Multiculturalism, Samita Anand, weigh in here?
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you for asking me to share my story. I am a family that immigrated to Alberta, and I am very proudly saying that I form that fabric of Alberta that most immigrant families do. And my story is no different than other families who immigrated with a little hope, a little apprehension, and a little bit of fear when you come to a new country. We happened to start our life in Quebec. And being an immigrant family, I didn't speak or understand French at all, and it was extremely difficult to create a life and a happy place for our family. And then one friend comes along and says, hey, you should come to Alberta. There's no PST. Homes are cheap. And you know what? jobs are available, and rightly so. Our family was able to settle better. Even on this panel today, there are 3 first-generation immigrants that are talking to you, not because we want to point a finger at immigrants, but I think we need to strike a balance here that we, just like all of you, should be contributing before we take away. I think that's the most important question here. BC,
Sorry, go ahead.
Take a few more seconds. BC and Ontario are very expensive to live in. What happens when Alberta becomes the same situation? Where do we go from here? Is the question. I think we need to take some conscious steps, some check stops for our children, grandchildren, and for all Albertans here. Thank you.
Hear, hear. All right, go ahead, sir.
All right. Thank you, everybody. So in 2014, under the previous federal Conservative government, there were 292 asylum claims from India in that year. In the last year, 2024, there were 32,563 from India alone, according to the federal government's own numbers. As far as I'm aware, in the last 11 years, the conditions that would lead somebody to claim asylum have not changed in India. So obviously, there's a large amount of fraud going on here. Is there anything that the provincial government can do to combat the asylum fraud that's happening?
That's a good question.
One of the things that changed under this current government is the way asylum seekers came into Canada. Before, you heard that they were going across Roxham Road, that they were getting driven to the border and going across. They did manage to close that down. And then all of a sudden they were turning up at the airports, which you would think would be the easiest thing for us to control. So we've got Air Canada, which does international flights, mostly to Toronto and Montreal. That's where most of the asylum seekers are coming in. And it's been extraordinary. In the past, we used to only have 4,000 people or less come through the airports to seek asylum. I think the last numbers I looked at, it's more like 60,000 a year. And that's part of what you're seeing. So what happens is once the asylum is declared, then it takes years to go through the process. And if I understand it, if you're an asylum seeker, you don't get a work permit. So they get held up, put up in hotels and supported while they're going through that process. That's what Doug Ford was recently talking about with his great frustration on it. So yeah, I think they'd be able to address it. One of the things that they did in Mexico is that they used to have a visa to be able to come here because people were doing the same thing. They got rid of the visa, numbers went up, they put the visa back in and required that you had a return ticket, numbers went way down. So there are things that the federal government could do to stem the flow that you're talking about. It takes the political will to do it though. So yeah, that's one of our frustrations. One of the things that we had found, and this is not good for newcomers, somebody coming into the Calgary International Airport, they were driving them to our navigation center. Our navigation center is for people who are homeless and addicted and in very dire straits. That's not a place that you have some new mom coming in from a foreign country go to with her kids. Like it was crazy that was what their attitude was. And so we've kind of sent them back and said, Canadian Border Services, this is a problem that you've got to deal with a different way. But we don't have quite the same problem that they do in Ontario and Quebec. It's quite bad in Ontario and Quebec.
It's, trust me, we're trying. So before I ask the question, to those of you in the line that I didn't get to, no problem. You can come back and ask it once we do the next topic, okay? The question is, should Alberta take more control of the immigration system to counter Ottawa's open border policies? Who says yes? I know one person said no. Who else? Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Great discussion. Very good discussion. The last video that we'll play and then we'll discuss is the subject of provincial tax collection.
Our next topic is the option of Alberta collecting all provincial personal income taxes, rather than having Ottawa do it for us. Today, when Albertans file and pay their personal income taxes, they do so through the Canada Revenue Agency, which then remits the provincial portion of those personal income taxes back to the provincial government. However, Alberta businesses file and pay their provincial corporate taxes directly to the provincial government. Quebec does it differently. They collect both personal and corporate income taxes directly from Quebecers. bypassing the CRA altogether. What if Alberta did the same? There would definitely be startup and ongoing administration costs, but it would also mean bringing good-paying jobs to Alberta instead of funding federal employees in other parts of the country. Under Canada's Constitution, levying and collecting taxes is an area of provincial jurisdiction, and Alberta could transition over the coming years to collecting our personal income taxes, as we do with corporate taxes now. So what are some of the benefits to Alberta collecting its own personal income taxes? 1. Better provincial tax policy. Currently, Alberta sets its own tax rates and credits, but definitions and treatments of income are still largely tied to federal rules, which limits our flexibility to implement more effective and competitive tax policy. We saw this recently when the federal government changed the rules on capital gains for doctors and other professionals, and Alberta was effectively forced to follow those same rules as it related to provincial personal income taxes. If Alberta were to collect its own taxes, we could tailor our entire tax framework to better reflect our economic realities and provincial policy goals, while declining federal changes to certain portions of tax policies that detrimentally affect provincial income tax policy. This could open the door to streamlining calculations and simplifying provincial income taxes for Alberta residents. 2. Jobs and economic opportunity at home. Collecting our own taxes would also mean establishing the infrastructure and staffing to support it, creating thousands of good, high-paying jobs right here in Alberta, instead of funding positions in Ottawa or other provinces. 3. More Alberta, less Ottawa. By moving away from the federal administration of the CRA and collecting provincial income taxes by ourselves, Alberta can exercise more direct control over a core aspect of self-government, thereby increasing our provincial independence from Ottawa. But there are also potential drawbacks to consider. 1. A long-term commitment. Establishing Alberta's own personal income tax collection agency would not happen overnight. Estimates suggest it could take up to 5 years to fully build out the necessary systems and staffing. This would be a major logistical undertaking that would require a sustained commitment from Albertans and their government. 2. Significant financial investment. The estimated cost to implement Alberta's own tax agency ranges from $750 million to $1.5 billion over several years. Once operational, the system could cost up to $750 million annually and require hiring as many as 5,000 new public employees. These are substantial expenses that must be weighed against the benefits. 3. Potential for added complexity. There are also practical implications for taxpayers and businesses. Albertans would need to file separate federal and provincial tax forms, although online filing would likely ease that burden. There may also be increased complexities for businesses and Albertans working in different provinces throughout the year. Now, tell us what you think about the idea of Alberta collecting its own personal income taxes.
I promised we'd try to hear from every panelist tonight, and I saved a couple for the end. There'll be a couple when we open it up on open discussions. Just a reminder, we'll take this topic for a few minutes, and then we'll open it up. If you didn't get to the mic and you had a question on policing or pension or something else to do with Ottawa, we'll take those. We're going to start with this topic, though. And MLA Lunty, I'd like you to weigh in first.
Sure. Thanks, Bruce, and thanks, everyone, for coming. Tax collection is usually not our longest line, so I'm not surprised. But I think it's an important conversation to have. You know, the long and the short of it is, if we can look at some better tax policy from a provincial perspective, I think it's worth it. You know, we saw the backtrack with the federal announcement with some of their changes that they were looking to implement. The new Prime Minister came in and quickly backed away, but that's an example where if the province had control over that, then it wouldn't be an issue. Personally, I think anything that we can maybe diminish the role of the CRA would also be welcome. We know that's a really bureaucratic institution down in Ottawa. I don't want to pick on them too much, but I would note it was interesting that the CRA had dozens of staff who they had to fire because they were taking CERB during COVID when they weren't supposed to be. So I think that's an example of a federal bureaucracy that maybe would be better in Alberta. When I think about tax collection, just for an example, I like to think about tax policy in general, and of course our tax cut that we're implementing, $750 per person, up to $1,500 per family. So it's an example of good tax policy that our government's moving forward. But on the other hand, it's like Trevor said, there's always pros and cons. The video did a good job of talking about what that would actually look like from an administrative cost. So I think this is why we're here as a panel. Let's put these issues on the table. Let's talk about the good and the bad. But I think we could move forward in a positive way for Alberta if we took a look at this.
Thank you, Brandon. MLA Lunty, over here.
Speaking about tax, we're being taxed at 50% right now. I was lucky to have 5 kids. One of them is overseas right now, trying to get out of Canadian tax. They figure they leave the country for 7 years, they'll pack away $1 million that they would pay to the federal government. I've got another son that lives in Kitimat right now. Alberta, the Americans are after him. They want Alberta to send their gas to Texas so that they can set another LNG plant. He's a millwright in Kitimat. They offered him same dollar in US dollars and a flat 15% tax. That's where we're at. We need to separate.
Okay. Go ahead, sir. Over here. Yep.
Okay. Well, I have to add to that on capital gains tax that Mr. Trudeau brought in. My son has been affected with that very heavily. He does business in the USA. Both my boys have moved away from Canada because of the government situation here. Yeah, they saw no future, and they didn't want to subject their families, their children, to a future in Canada because, you know, it was just horrible. And, you know, I would go too, but I support 65 employees, meaning 65 families. So I stay here. I'm 70 years old still, paddling the boat because of those people. I don't need it. I haven't needed it for a long time.
Hey, thanks for that. What's your business?
I do oil field service business and recycling.
Appreciate it. Wonderful. Thanks for coming out tonight. I see that the lines are shorter, so if you wanted to speak to one of the earlier topics and you couldn't, go ahead. And then we'll come over here.
Thank you. I'm just going to, get a couple of points of clarification on the video there. It mentioned that we could be producing as much as 5,000-ish jobs here in Alberta. Can somebody on the panel let me know how many people live in Alberta currently and work for the CRA? No? Okay, I'll help you out. It's just about 4,000. There's also TSOs, which are offices for the Canada Revenue Agency in Calgary, Edmonton, Lethbridge, and Red Deer. So I just want us to have the facts, which isn't really apparent from the video. We don't really get all the information. So the 5,000 people we're going to start employing in Alberta, if we do our own $750 million a year, are already employed in Alberta. They're already working in this agency. So it seems like that's a real lost
Should we stick
cause.
with stick with the
sir, you
feds?
shouldn't have cut me off before the time just because I'm not agreeing with you.
I just asked you a question. Now I cut you off. This is what happens when I cut you off. Okay, go over here.
Okay, my question is, it's more of a comment regarding immigration. I think the temporary foreign worker program needs to be changed. I realize it's federal, but I think it's causing immigrants to come into Canada and Alberta that are low-skilled and are being supported by the federal government. I think we need to change that so we're bringing in people that have skills.
Thank you.
And secondly, we also need to have in our universities that are doing medicine, we have a large number of foreign students that are going into medicine. And I would like to see Canadian students go into those positions, and also Canadians that have gone to like Ireland to go to school in medicine should be able to come back and work here.
Can I ask if anybody has experience dealing with Ottawa and the policies as they differ with what we're trying to do in Alberta? It would probably be our Environment Minister, Rebecca Schultz. So everything we've talked about tonight ties into it. Would you like to comment on what you've heard from the great people of Medicine Hat tonight and add some context to sort of what your line of work is like?
Well, sure, I'm happy to talk about that. And first, I just want to thank everybody for coming out. It's a nice evening. I know it's a busy time of year where people are getting ready for harvest. Kids are going back to school. Mine started today, too. So thanks for taking the time to come out. I think what we've been hearing, and I certainly have heard this as an MLA, all of the issues that you have raised, we've heard it loud and clear, but it helps us to have a good discussion around what Albertans want us to move forward on. And I have had the distinct pleasure or challenge of working with the federal government on environmental policy for the last 3 years. And I can tell you that it is directly linked with the constitutional changes that we're looking at right now. We have a federal government who has brought in a tanker ban, Bill C-48. We have Bill C-69, which is the No More Pipelines law. They pretend that this is about emissions in the environment. It's not. If it was, what they would do is allow us to develop our resources and displace less responsibly produced energy elsewhere. That is what they would allow us to do. I know many of you work in the energy industry and related fields, whether that's oil field services. Thank you. Thank you for what you do to deliver Albertans, Canadians, and the rest of the world with safe, affordable, reliable energy. It also is directly linked to our national security, which is what this federal government ran on, a strong Canadian economy, national security. We're still waiting for them to step back. C-48, C-69, the clean electricity regulations. Let's just talk about that for a second. That would cost us $1.7 trillion to build that grid. The technology has never been proven. No company is going to step up to build a facility where the parameters have never been proven or tested, not only here, but nowhere in the world. It would leave our grid at risk in a Canadian winter. We do have a Canadian winter. This leaves us at risk of not having the generation we need to provide you with electricity in the middle of winter or the middle of summer where it gets really hot. And we have a federal environment minister that says if you build that plant and you turn it on, you could go to jail. Now, we have had the highest courts in our land say that this is unconstitutional, especially on Bill C-69. The previous federal government environment minister, Stephen Guilbeault, told me that, yeah, you can boo for that. He told me that is not a decision, it's just an opinion of the court. So when we talk about fighting for constitutional fairness, this is because we have a federal government that is completely disregarding the Constitution and our provincial jurisdiction. We cannot afford to give up tens of thousands of jobs in our oil industry because of an oil and gas production cap that, again, is built in radical activist environmental ideology and not in common sense. No other country around the world would do anything like this, and we shouldn't either. So with all of that, and it links in also to agriculture. I mean, we've seen the attack on our ag industry. It started with oil and gas, and it went straight to ag, whether that be on methane emissions or fertilizer bans. And so we do have, Premier once called it a lawless federal government who is completely disregarding the Constitution. And that's why we're having these conversations, because Albertans, I think we've heard tonight, Albertans have had enough. We contribute to the rest of Canada. We are clearly an economic driver, not just here in our own province, but for the rest of the country. And we shouldn't have a federal government that continually drives in our lane, but still wants to have all of the benefits from our economic success. And so for all of you who showed up to have a positive, respectful conversation about what options we want to exercise moving forward, I want to say thank you. And to our Premier, who, I don't think I've ever seen this, where if there is a topic of conversation that the people want to have, she is doing this across the province, traveling across the province for months on end. It never stops because she actually wants to hear what you have to say. And so, Premier, thank you on behalf of everyone here tonight.
So much there. I'm going to come back to agriculture in a minute with Tara and Melody, but first to the mics. Go ahead.
Hi, I've listened to a lot of different things here tonight, and I'd like to thank the panel and everybody else here. After all the views and what I'm hearing tonight, I've got one question: is what's Canada got to offer for us?
Yeah. Thank you. Can I just ask too, if you're in the line and you've already been to the mic and there are people in the line that have not been to the mic, can I ask you to step aside so that those who haven't been to the mic can go to the mic first? Is that fair? I think that's fair, right? There's some people that haven't got to speak tonight. We want to make sure they do. Okay, so who is next that hasn't spoken tonight? Let's make sure we get to everybody. Let's start here.
Thank you. I'd like to speak to the issue of immigration as it pertains to educating children and actually even adults, because when people come into the country, one of the things that has to happen is they have to get up on their language skills. And so as a former school administrator, I saw when the previous government, or an earlier government of our Prime Minister, brought in masses of immigrants, and then teachers have these students who don't have English skills. And so, for example, when you're doing language arts or even science or social studies, you know, kids don't understand. They're just off in a corner doing what? So you have to resource the people. And I guess my question then in that regard, does the federal government fund immigrants, immigrant education in that regard? And I know even adults who go to, say, Open Door Society kind of, you know, to get up on their education. Do we get any funding from the feds for that?
Yep. Premier?
Well, I think Amanda, who was from Brooks, would probably be able to tell you a little bit about the funding model that they have. And I think the answer is yes, but I think it's insufficient is what we hear. And especially when you look at what happened with the number of Ukrainian kids who came, we had to establish Ukrainian teaching programs and put, I think, $12 million into that program just because there was such a huge influx of students that came in. Can you do that with every linguistic group? It's pretty hard. I mean, Brooks is called the city of 100 hellos for a reason. If you go online and look at any of the apps that help you to do language learning, they only have, 10 or 20 languages there. So that's one of the barriers that we face. But it's also one of the advantages that you have when you've got a diaspora community who can assist with some of that. But we hear that it's the teachers in particular, that with the complexity in the classroom, if you've got kids as well who've come from a war-torn area, now you're dealing with trauma also in a classroom. And that's one of the big reasons why teachers are very frustrated about the class size and the complexity is because of that.
Go ahead.
Mine is more of an observation. My name is Darlene. I've been in Alberta all my life. And I think that there is a segment of this population here today that are very Canada first, and there's a segment of the population here today that are very Alberta separation. I hope that everyone came and listened. I know a lot of people, excuse me, were angry at first, excuse me, and we're talking about how it was just a sales pitch. Well, I don't know what your federal government has been giving to you for the last how many years, if not a sales pitch. But I do hope that a lot of these things, because they did give the negatives and the positives, and I hope that you all listened with an open mind to listen to all of it. And just one other thing about the equalization payments. I heard a deputy premier from Quebec, this is from years ago, say on record on television that the day that Quebec had to go in and do their own resource development, meaning oil and gas and their minerals, that the rest of Canada would not get 10 cents.
Yeah.
Not 10 cents.
Yeah.
And if you know how the equalization formula works, and for those of you who don't, you should look it up, that Quebec's electrical production is worth billions, but it's not all given in the equalization. Yep. So that's just my statement. Everybody keep an open mind.
Thank you. I wish we have a panelist named Michael Binion. I wish he was here tonight because he always speaks to these things. Do we want to try and pick that up? Anybody?
Well, I know that Trevor would.
Trevor?
I'll just jump in on that point about electricity prices in Quebec. So resource revenues here are from royalties on oil and gas primarily, and resource revenues in Quebec are from revenues generated by hydroelectricity production. Now, their power prices are by far the lowest in the country, and just to illustrate how much an effect it might have for their revenues and what we measure their fiscal capacity to be in equalization, if they were to increase power prices by just about 2 cents a kilowatt hour, they'd still have the lowest power prices in the country. And their equalization payment, I estimate this year, would drop from $13.6 billion to $9.4 just from that modest change. And so Yeah, this is, I mean, circling back to topic number one, why it's important to talk about whether the program design details can be tweaked and improved, because right now it does effectively subsidize the province to keep electricity prices artificially low.
And what if Michael was here, one of the things he would say, I think it was Pauline Marois that he said, her intention, because she was a separatist, was to not develop the natural gas resources or contemplate it until such time as Quebec was separate, because they didn't want to reduce their equalization payments. And so why can't we have a similar type of model? I mean, imagine if Alberta did that. Imagine if we said, yeah, we're going to either subsidize our gas or our oil, and we're now short, so can Canada make up the difference that we're short? No one would ever agree to that. And so why are we agreeing to allow other provinces to lock in their resources and not develop it, and then get other provinces to pay the difference?
I think I see one more person we haven't heard from, correct?
Yes, hello.
Go ahead.
I believe we should stay in Canada. I do think we're stronger together. It doesn't mean to say that there can't be changes or things to advocate for. I believe in terms of the question here about ideas that proportional representation would go a long way in improving our voice within the country, and I think that'd be something that we could do provincially as well. As for the immigration, it was referenced by somebody else that sometimes I think some of the problems that were being brought up, that immigration was being used as a scapegoat, and I do think that's true. I've worked in social services for over 20 years, and I can say we've had a housing crisis in Alberta well before we had the immigration increase. I'm not disputing those numbers of the increase of immigration, but it's that's been there before. My question about that to you is, in looking at the video that you shared on immigration, the proposal was that you were going to restrict services for newcomers, and by doing so, we're going to try to put pressure on the federal government to make changes, and I fear that's going to be putting vulnerable newcomers in the middle of this and hurting them.
Okay.
And so my question is, if that is what you're planning on doing or wanting to do.
I'm not sure.
We're getting feedback on that. I mean, as I said, what I would like to do is take over immigration from beginning to end. Exactly. Is that if we could get a more normal number, which would be 1%, which would be higher than historically. I mean, if historically it was 0.6%, we went to 1%, that'd be higher than usual. And if we were then able to focus the bulk of the newcomers on economic migrants, it becomes immaterial, because then they're taxpayers first. And if you're a taxpayer in Alberta, of course, you're going to be able to enjoy over time the same access to programs as anyone else if you become a permanent immigrant and then ultimately a citizen. I think the problem that we have seen is that when you're an asylum seeker, there's a lot of upfront costs associated with supporting that person, sometimes through years, and then at the end of that process, if they're found to be illegitimate, then they can also claim that because we've been here long enough, from compassionate reasons, you should allow us to stay. But that's the dynamic that we find ourselves in right now, and that's why I think you're seeing some of the frustration people have.
We're getting very close to the end. Tara, about agriculture, we've talked about it some tonight, but you, obviously, given your line of work, would well, now an MLA, I guess there's a lot of bullshit in being an MLA too, so maybe, sorry, it's been a long night. Can you talk about agriculture and food supply and some of the issues in dealing with the federal government from a provincial perspective?
I was concerned for a minute there where that question was going.
Sorry, so was I.
No, it's fine. When you said the BS part, I was like, yeah, I'm a farmer. We started harvest today. I am a new MLA, but in my role before, I was chair with Alberta Grains and Grain Growers of Canada, so I've been representing barley and wheat farmers for the last 8 years, trying to go down to Ottawa and explain to them about what was wrong with some of the policies that they were doing. And to say it was a struggle and a test of patience is an understatement. We've talked about some of one of the comments I know someone mentioned about temporary foreign workers. In agriculture, we have a need for workers, and there are a lot of farms that actually rely on that program. So I don't want to, my family doesn't, but a lot of my friends across the country do. And I understand that, like, we have an issue with that. When you come to immigration, skilled workers is a problem. And I'm seeing it in my constituency already with people who want to stay, but their visa is almost up, and it's a skilled worker that is going to be sent home because they're not going to be able to stay. That's a problem. When you talk about the carbon tax, when you talk about, who said it earlier actually, on the capital gains, you want to talk about farm succession? They didn't care when I went down there, I can tell you right now, when we tried to say, this is a problem, you've got to do something. You're not thinking about farms. Fertilizer reduction, we have the tools in our toolbox you're going to take away, and then what does that do? Talk about food prices in the grocery store, right? So, yep. I mean, I could rant for a really long time. You shouldn't ask me to talk ag because it's not about complaining to Ottawa. Yeah. It is about the fact that they aren't always listening. And I will say to all of you, I greatly appreciate that you are here. This entire panel is taking this very seriously. You are being heard on both sides, no matter what you think. That's what we're here. We want to hear all the sides. So thank you for being here. Yeah.
Let's pick up on the food supply issue. Melody, you have spoken about it before, and I think you can add to what Tara just said.
Yeah, I'll be really quick because I think what we need to recognize here is you all eat food, and food affordability is probably quite high on the list of all of us, but especially those vulnerable populations. And when we look at really what's happening on the federal level and their policies that are impacting food security and food affordability, we have to be mindful of that. So right now, all of the ag ministers across Canada are headed to, I believe it's Winnipeg. They're going to have a meeting and they're going to talk about principles of the Canadian Agricultural Partnership. It used to be Growing Forward, used to be Growing Forward 2, and then we got Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, which now ties the hands of farmers and ranchers to environmental initiatives in order for them to access certain programs and resources. That's not happening in other countries. So we're putting our farmers and ranchers on an uneven playing field, and which means you're paying more for your steaks. Your sugar that's coming in is made with forced labor and child labor. Like, there's all of these federal policies that we need to look at. And I think that's one of the things that this panel is about. Good governance is looking at policy at all levels on affordability. That's one of the key things. So we are here, we are listening to you, as Tara said. We are hearing you, and we need to look at ways we can make it better for Albertans and to decrease your food prices.
Just one more thing. Can I just say one more thing? Because we actually haven't talked, and it does involve research. So the fact that the government has put environmental constraints on research. So when you talk about wanting to fund a scientist who's doing something for a better better breeding program, instead of something that's going to make a difference at the farm gate, they have to create a proposal that's got a certain percentage of environmental in it to even be able to get the funding. It's redonkulous.
Okay, thank you. We're running over time. Stephen, you wanted to make a comment on something that's important to you,
yes.
And I think we should let you do that.
Thank you, Bruce.
Hey,
I want to share another person.
You didn't hear me. I said Stephen, but I will come to you as well if you'd like.
So sorry.
Go ahead. Whoever, Stephen and Samita both want to make a comment, so go ahead.
Yeah, so again, thank you all for coming today, and I just wanted to address something I should address in Lloyd Minister, and the whole issue of separation from Canada. It's tough to do. 100%, 44 First Nations in Alberta said no to separation. And I'll tell you this, and I'll tell you why. You know what, the treaty rights have been acknowledged and recognized in the Supreme Court, and right now they are paying for compensation for many, many years of fighting in court. Not far from here is the Siksika Nation. They had a settlement of $1.4 billion. $400 million of that went into this economy. How many farmers were able to do that? That want separation? Not far from Edmonton. There's 4 First Nations that set settlements on treaty rights. That's about another $100 million into Alberta's economy. Now, it's tough to do. After what we're talking about, I see a path forward in some issues. You know, I invite you, if you want to separate, take your platform, go see Chief Ori Crowfoot, go see Chief Platted Hair from the Blood Tribe, and tell them your thoughts on why they should separate until then.
I had to give you that time, Stephen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sumita, as well, please.
Sorry. I didn't mean to speak over you, but I was so passionate about what I was trying to say. Somebody on the right side of the mic, a lady came up and said about the more medical schools in here in Alberta, and the kids who go outside to study and never come back. This hits personally home. My own daughter is a practicing physician here in family medicine, and she couldn't get into medical school here. She had to go south of the border. But guess what? She's come back because brain drain is not a given. It's a personal choice. She's come back to practice here. So the system doesn't make it harder. The system actually is there. You just have to navigate the system. And if you want to do it, if there's a will, there's a way.
Okay. Thank you. So, Premier, we are over time. I promised 8:30, but I would be interested in hearing you bookend, maybe make some concluding comments.
Well, thanks everyone for being here this evening. I know I've heard a lot of frustration with opportunities for young kids, with taxes being too high, with frustration about being able to access programs and support our healthcare system, education system, and so on. And I think all of this is linked. I mean, one of the reasons why we've been so frustrated at the cancellation of Energy East and the cancellation of Northern Gateway and the cancellation of Keystone XL is if those 3 projects had gone ahead, they'd be built and operating today. They would be 2.5 million barrels a day of oil more than we have right now, which at today's market price would be about $55 billion per year, of which governments take about 40% of that. So we would be able to have it all. We would be able to invest in all the social programs everyone cares about without seeing the increase in our taxes and still having money to be able to put into our heritage fund to save for a long-term future. So that is the consequence of the federal government saying you can't do that. And that's why we just do not want a repeat of the last 10 years. We want to see if we can aspirationally work with our neighbors to build a pipeline to Churchill and a pipeline to Prince Rupert and maybe some down south as well. That's what we're hoping to be able to do, but we need a partner in Ottawa to do that. And so the question, I suppose, comes down to, do we want to pursue a path of more responsible government? Are we at a size as well as a population where we just should do more of these things because it's the right thing to do as a grown-up province? I think one of our panelists at one point said, you can't really be the teenager stamping your feet in the basement saying, you don't respect me, when you're still sitting and living off mom and dad. If you want respect, you kind of have to get out on your own and start doing your own things, and then you can have a grown-up conversation about it. And so Quebec has that grown-up conversation. They're taken very seriously because they have pursued a stronger path of responsible government. And we're just asking you, do you think it's time for Alberta to do the same thing? And if not that, then what? And thank you so much for giving us some great ideas this evening. And thanks to the panel for being here, and thanks to Bruce for moderating. I've enjoyed the conversation.
On that note, thank you. It is so good to be home. It's good to be in Medicine Hat tonight. We really appreciate the feedback. And I would ask, as we go, you give yourselves a hand and the Premier and the panel a hand for the back and forth tonight. Really appreciated it. Thank you.